Chapter 1183. Lu Sanjin had told Chu Xiu about High Heaven Sect's martial arts gambling fight before coming here. It was nothing more than a dispute between the various great sects, so they had to find a less intense and reasonable place to resolve it. To put it bluntly, it was a place for the major sects to show off their strength. Of course, since it was a duel, one could choose not to participate, but it would tarnish their reputation. Chu Xiu was dragged along by Lu Sanjin mainly to deal with this situation and prevent the Imperial Sky Pavilion from losing too badly. Qin Baiyuan clapped his hands. Immediately, someone carried a large pile of items up and opened them one by one. In an instant, the place was filled with jewels and treasures. As the number one sect in the eastern region, the High Heaven sect was quite particular when it came to doing things. The value of these treasures was not low. As long as one participated in the martial arts duel, one would be able to get one regardless of the outcome. Qin Baiyuan clapped his hands and said with a smile, "Everyone here is the most outstanding talent in the eastern region and even the Daluotian. Anyone who wants to go up and learn from each other can come up and have a try. Of course, a small gamble is good for the mood, but a large gamble is harmful. A martial arts wager is also a wager. It's fine if you don't overdo it. Don't get serious and hurt the harmony. That wouldn't be good." On the Cold River City's side, Qi Wuhan suddenly smiled. He stood up and said, "My Cold River City would like to fight with the Imperial Sky Pavilion. I wonder if anyone from the Imperial Sky Pavilion dares to come up?" Upon hearing Qi Wuhan's words, everyone present had different expressions. They had long heard about the fallout between Cold River City and the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Now, it could be said that both sides were only one step away from exterminating each other. Cold River City had no confidence to fight, and the Imperial Sky Pavilion dared not make the first move. Therefore, it was normal for Qi Wuhan to step up and challenge the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Qi Wuhan was not too old, and the martial arts duel was not that strict. As long as one was not a martial immortal of the older generation, one could participate. However, the crowd looked at the Imperial Sky Pavilion with a hint of sympathy. After all, in their opinion, there was no one from the Imperial Sky Pavilion who was in the profound illumination realm. Although Chu Xiu had once forced Qi Wuhan to retreat, that matter was only known by the people of Cold River City and the Royal Sky Pavilion. Both sides did not spread the news, so most people really did not know Chu Xiu's actual strength. Before the Imperial Sky Pavilion could answer, Yuan Fu sitting next to Qi Wuhan said lightly, "Chu Xiu, I heard that you're also the successor of the ancient venerable? You hide and dare not reveal who your master is. Ridiculous. I heard that you've killed ethereal enlightenment cultivators before. Let's exchange a few blows. I'd like to see just how strong you, the Prime Sovereign's successor, are." The successor of Sword Venerable Ling Tian's lineage, Yuan Fu, was very famous. When everyone present heard this, their eyes immediately revealed an expression as if they were watching a good show. At this time, on the High Heaven sect's side, Xinyuan Wushuang suddenly stood up and said coldly, "I also want to challenge Chu Xiu again." Xinyuan Wushuang said coldly, "I also want to challenge Chu Xiu again." The last time he had lost, it was simply inexplicable. He did not know why the fighting soul he had summoned had suddenly lost its effect and had even started to bite back. He was defeated by Chu Xiu in an inexplicable way. He didn't know why the fighting soul he summoned suddenly lost its effect and even started to attack him. Therefore, when he saw Chu Xiu coming, he couldn't help but take the initiative to challenge Chu Xiu. Qin Baiyuan frowned and said, "Wushuang, don't make trouble." The High Heaven sect would usually not participate in the martial arts duel after the founding ceremony. They were only the organizers. After all, there was no reason for them to win their own things. Moreover, this was their home ground, so they had the most people. If they all participated in the duel, it would seem that they were bullying others. Xinyuan Wushuang shook his head stubbornly and said, "Old sect master, the rules don't say that the High Heaven sect can't participate in the duel, right? I'll participate in the duel, but I don't want the prize." As soon as Xinyuan Wushuang finished speaking, someone in the field laughed and said, "So many people want to challenge the Imperial Sky Pavilion? It's very lively. Why don't we join next? I also admire the experts of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. The person who stood up was a cultivator in a blood-red robe who looked to be in his 30s or 40s. He looked feminine and strange. Everyone present was shocked to see this scene. Who did the Imperial Sky Pavilion offend? Why was everyone targeting the Imperial Sky Pavilion? Lu Jianghu raised his eyebrows and said, "Who is this guy?" The Imperial Sky Pavilion has offended a lot of people. Lu Sanjin corrected him. It's the Imperial Sky Pavilion, not the Imperial Sky Pavilion. We're on the same side now. Then, Lu Sanjin looked at the man in the blood-red robe and snorted coldly. This guy is In Shueli, the sect master of the Eastern Region Blood River sect, the disciple of the Blood River Ancestor. The Blood River Ancestor isn't a martial immortal, but he's a half-step martial immortal. Hence, the Blood River sect is a sect that's second only to the top sects in the Eastern region. I heard that the Blood River Ancestor went to find trouble with the Cold River City in the past. In the end, he was subdued by Yi Weikong. From then on, the Cold River City ruled over him. He's very spineless. Since In Shueli has the guts to jump out and find trouble with the Imperial Sky Pavilion, he must have been instructed by the people of the Cold River City. Damn it. This guy is extremely daring. He doesn't dare to offend the Cold River City, but he dares to offend the Imperial Sky Pavilion? Usually, in a martial arts duel, everyone would fight against each other. While showing off their prowess, they could also earn some good luck. However, this time around, before the others said anything, most people targeted the Imperial Sky Pavilion. This caused the atmosphere in the field to become heavy. Lu Sanjin turned his gaze to Chu Xiu. He wanted to ask Chu Xiu what they should do now. If it was only the Cold River City, they could still take on the challenge. However, now that the other guys were involved, how could they fight? However, before Lu Sanjin could speak, Chu Xiu suddenly stood up and said, "Everyone wants to challenge the Imperial Sky Pavilion? It seems like the Imperial Sky Pavilion is very popular. Sure, I'll accept all the challenges." When Chu Xiu said that, the others were stunned. There were 3 mystic illuminating realm cultivators in addition to Shenyuan Wushuang, who was not inferior to the mystic illuminating realm cultivators and whose name had spread throughout the Daluotian world. Was this Chu Xiu crazy? Lu Sanjin also looked at Chu Xiu in shock. Although he had invited Chu Xiu over to be a hired thug, "Big brother, could you not be so headstrong? How were they supposed to fight?" After a pause, Chu Xiu continued, "However, the Imperial Sky Pavilion has accepted the challenges of so many people. I wonder if High Heaven City dares to add to the wager?" Qin Baiyuan frowned and looked at Chu Xiu, saying, "What do you want to add?" Because of the last fight between Shenyuan Wushuang and Chu Xiu, Qin Baiyuan did not have a good impression of Chu Xiu. Although it was Shenyuan Wushuang who disobeyed the rules and used a killing move in the martial arts show, Shenyuan Wushuang was still a disciple of High Heaven sect. If he still liked Chu Xiu, he would really be a saint. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "It's very simple. I heard that the spiritual cloud realm of the High Heaven sect is rich in heaven and earth yuan qi. If we win, I want to use the spiritual cloud realm to cultivate for a few days. Is that possible?" The others present did not feel anything wrong. For a top sect like the High Heaven sect, there must be a lot of blessed caves in the sect. The most important blessed cave of the High Heaven sect should be the High Heaven sect's ancestral land, the scripture pavilion of the High Heaven sect, and the place where all kinds of trump cards were stored. It was the most important place, so it was personally guarded by a powerhouse like Linghu Immortal Mountain. They had heard of the spiritual cloud realm. It should be one of the more important blessed caves of the High Heaven sect, but it was appropriate to use it as a wager. However, Qin Baiyuan frowned slightly. He did not expect that Chu Xiu would make such a request. In fact, it was not a big deal to let Chu Xiu enter the blessed cave to cultivate, but Qin Baiyuan did not forget what the ancestors of the High Heaven sect had told him in the past. Qin Baiyuan was far younger than the old pavilion master. He was just close to 400 years old, and he was not even born in the battle 500 years ago. But when the previous pavilion master told him, he had already said that there was an extremely terrible existence imprisoned in the spiritual cloud realm, so he must be very careful. Was it inappropriate to let an outsider enter the spiritual cloud realm? However, before Qin Baiyuan could speak, Xianyuan Wushuang snorted coldly and said, "You want to enter the spiritual cloud realm to cultivate? Sure, but you have to win this round. Otherwise, not only can you not enter the spiritual cloud realm, but you will also lose the wager you deserve." Chu Xiu stood with his hands clasped behind his back and said lightly, "Don't worry, I can afford to lose." Seeing that Xianyuan Wushuang had agreed first, Qin Baiyuan could only frown and shake his head gently. He said in a low voice, "Chu Xiu, since you have promised this battle, don't regret it. Since you are representing the Imperial Sky Pavilion, you have to win all 4 battles. If you lose one, your Imperial Sky Pavilion will lose all. Don't say that the High Heaven sect took this opportunity to bully you. After all, Xianyuan Wushuang was a member of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Since he had promised, if Qin Baiyuan went back on his word in front of so many people, it would be a little stingy. However, Qin Baiyuan was not too nervous, because the spiritual cloud realm had already been opened when he was the pavilion master. The spiritual cloud realm was very large, and the place where the terrifying existence was sealed was only in the deepest part of the spiritual cloud realm. As long as the formation in the deepest part was not destroyed, everything would be fine. It was such a big paradise, but it had always been kept in a sealed state. That was a waste. Qin Baiyuan had not been involved in the battle 500 years ago, so he had not seen the strength of the terrifying existence with his own eyes. Therefore, he had already tried to open the spiritual cloud realm blessed abode and send some disciples in to cultivate, but he had warned them not to get close to the formation. For so many years, the High Heaven sect had sent many disciples in, but nothing had happened. Therefore, in the entire High Heaven sect, except for Qin Baiyuan, the old sect master, no one took this matter seriously. Only he still remembered some of the warnings of the former sect master. Now, as an outsider, Chu Xiu was sent in, and all he needed to do was to keep an eye on him and keep him away from the formation. Moreover, the battle had not ended yet. Qin Baiyuan did not believe that the Imperial Sky Pavilion could win this round with so few people. Chapter 1184. Seeing that Qin Baiyuan had agreed so easily, Chu Xiu was taken aback. After all, the Divine Cloud Realm was the place where Dugu Weiwei was sealed. He thought that Qin Baiyuan would try his best to evade. Chu Xiu had even prepared some provocative words, but he did not expect Qin Baiyuan to agree. However, after thinking about it carefully, Chu Xiu could roughly guess what was going on. What was the strongest power in this world? It was not the domain divine ability, nor was it the law of heaven and earth. It was time. No matter how strong a power was, it would be diluted by time. In the past, the old pavilion master was even unwilling to recall that battle because he had seen it with his own eyes. The fear of Dugu Weiwei had always been imprinted in his heart. Now, no one in High Heaven sect, including the old sect master Qin Baiyuan, had experienced that battle, so they had no way of imagining it. As such, their attitude towards Dugu Weiwei was still quite serious, but not to the point of fear like the old pavilion master. Seeing that the matter had been settled, Lu Sanjin gritted his teeth and stood up as well. Lu Sanjin was not an irresponsible person. This time, he was the one who asked Chu Xiu to come. Now that Chu Xiu had stood up, how could he object? Moreover, this time, these people led by Cold River City were obviously targeting the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Even if they managed to avoid it this time, there would be a next time. Chu Xiu said to Lu Jianghe and Lu Fengxian, "I will deal with the successor of Sword Venerable Ling Tian. As for the rest, you can pick one." When everyone present saw Chu Xiu's attitude, they could not help but shake their heads. Was this Chu Xiu really arrogant, or was he fearless because he was ignorant? Did he want to challenge Yin Shuili and Xianyuan Wushuang with just 2 nameless people? Lu Jianghe stretched his neck and said, "Leave that Blood River sect guy to me." Lu Fengxian nodded and said, "Then leave the rest to me." Xianyuan Wushuang frowned and said, "Who wants to fight with a nameless person like you? I want to fight with Chu Xiu again." Chu Xiu glanced at Yu Wenfu and said lightly, "This one wants to fight with me, and that one also wants to fight with me. Do you think I can split myself into 2? Why don't the two of you fight first and decide the winner before you fight me? Yuan Fu and Xinyuan Wushuang snorted at the same time. They were not idiots. How could they do such a stupid thing just to compete for opponents? Yuan Fu laughed and said, "Young Master Xinyuan, don't worry. You've already fought with Chu Xiu last time, so this time it's my turn. Don't worry, I'll definitely make him lose miserably and help you vent your anger." Between Yuan Fu and Xinyuan Wushuang, one was conceited, while the other was proud. On other occasions, Xinyuan Wushuang might not give in to Yuan Fu. However, this was High Heaven Sect, and Xinyuan Wushuang was a member of High Heaven Sect. He had to save some face for High Heaven Sect, so he could not compete with Yuan Fu. Chu Xiu glanced at Lu Sanjin and said, "Are you sure you can deal with Qi Wuhan?" Lu Sanjin shook his head and said in a low voice, "Of course not, but I have to fight with him. This time they are targeting Emperor Heaven Pavilion. Brother Chu, you have stopped so many people, so of course you have to leave Qi Wuhan to me. This is Emperor Heaven Pavilion's own business." Strictly speaking, Chu Xiu and the others were not members of Emperor Heaven Pavilion. However, these outsiders were willing to fight with the identity of Emperor Heaven Pavilion. As the East Territory traveler of Emperor Heaven Pavilion, how could he shrink back? Xinyuan Wushuang was the first to lose his temper. He stood out with halberd in his hand and pointed at Lu Fengxian, saying, "Boy, don't waste time. Come out first and finish this round quickly. Chu Xiu, if you are not injured by Yuan Fu, let's fight again." His target had always been Chu Xiu. Even if Yuan Fu defeated Chu Xiu, he would not be avenging Xinyuan Wushuang. Xinyuan Wushuang could only avenge himself. Lu Fengxian had a good temper. At least he would not be angry with Xinyuan Wushuang because of his arrogant attitude. Hearing this, he also left his seat, took out his halberd, cupped his fists and said to Xinyuan Wushuang, "I'm Lu. I'm not interested in knowing your name." Xinyuan Wushuang directly waved his hand and interrupted Lu Fengxian, saying coldly, "There are so many weak people in this world. If I remember their names one by one, won't I die of exhaustion? You only need to know that you have fought with me, Xinyuan Wushuang. That's enough. You're actually using a heavenly halberd? That's even better. Today, I'll teach you what the real halberd is like and what kind of person deserves to use halberd." Hearing this, the corners of the mouths of the people present twitched. They had long heard that Xinyuan Wushuang, the genius disciple of High Heaven Sect, was a little abnormal. Now it seemed that he was not abnormal at all. He was simply arrogant. Although they did not think that an unknown guy could defeat Xinyuan Wushuang, Xinyuan Wushuang's attitude made them speechless. However, Lu Fengxian's self-restraint left a good impression on the audience. If it were them, they would have already scolded Xinyuan Wushuang after hearing his words. However, Lu Fengxian still said with a gentle smile on his face, "Really? Then I'd like to learn from you. Unfortunately, you won't be able to learn more than a few moves from me." Xinyuan Wushuang clenched the High Heaven Dragon Suppression halberd in his hand, and the golden light of Gang Qi soared into the sky. In an instant, the roar of a dragon suddenly sounded. The powerful Gang Qi fluctuations almost overflowed the terrace, which made the faces of the people present change. It was said that Xinyuan Wushuang's strength was amazing. Today, they finally witnessed it. What was the difference between such a powerful force and an expert in the profound enlightenment realm? They could not help but feel a little sympathy for Lu Fengxian. Before they could sympathize with him for long, strands of powerful demon qi had already attached to Lu Fengxian's body. Demon clouds soared into the sky and even caused the weather to change. In an instant, the whole stand was covered with dark clouds. An incomparably ferocious aura emanated from the unparalleled heavenly halberd, even causing Lu Fengxian's eyes to emit a violent scarlet light. In terms of momentum alone, Lu Fengxian was not much inferior to Xinyuan Wushuang. Looking at Lu Fengxian in front of him, Xinyuan Wushuang slightly raised his eyebrows and said, "You have some ability. No wonder you dare to stand out and challenge me. Unfortunately, it's still useless." As Xinyuan Wushuang's voice fell, he directly smashed down with halberd Wushuang in his hand. The dazzling golden Gang Qi turned into 9 dragons coiling behind him and strengthened the power of his halberd. In an instant, As if the sky was falling and the earth was sinking, the powerful wave of power even shook the whole space and made a loud sonic boom. Xianyuan Wushuang had made some progress in the last battle with Chu Xiu. The only thing he learned was that even a lion should use all its strength to fight a rabbit. No matter how much he looked down on a person, he should not underestimate his opponent. So this time, he also used all his strength. 9 Heavens Fiend Golden Body had been activated to the extreme by Lu Fengxian, and there was even a huge shadow of a demon looming behind him. Unparalleled magic weapon fell against Xianyuan Wushuang's High Heaven Dragon Subduing Halberd. When the two halberds collided, the Golden Gang Qi and the Pitch-Black Devil Qi suddenly burst out. With a loud bang, they condensed into a huge Gang Qi storm and began to spread in all directions. On the high platform of the martial arts practice field, the surrounding formations had been activated in an instant, digesting the huge power fluctuations caused by the fight between the two. The booming sounds of explosions kept coming. The moment the two people collided, Xianyuan Wushuang's expression changed. Power, powerful power. The power that erupted from LV Fengxian's body was too strong. It was so strong that even he couldn't withstand it. Moreover, it was not the power of Gang Qi, but the pure power of the body. It was simply invincible. At this time, Lu Fengxian's exposed skin was even plated with a layer of black and red demonic pattern, which was a sign that the 9 Heavens Fiend Golden Body had been cultivated to the extreme. During this period of time, Chu Xiu had a better understanding of this cultivation method than Lu Fengxian because he often fought with others. But now it seemed that Lu Fengxian, who specialized in this cultivation method, had surpassed Chu Xiu in this aspect. Xianyuan Wushuang could no longer withstand this powerful physical power, so he had to choose to withdraw. But the next moment, the unparalleled halberd in Lu Fengxian's hand followed closely behind and directly smashed over. The violent momentum stirred like a turbulent current, instantly condensing the surrounding Gang Qi into a storm. When the unparalleled demon halberd was displayed, the halberd skill was simply magnificent to the extreme, and it was also mixed with violent fighting intent. The long halberd smashed down one after another, and each strike was extremely powerful. This halberd skill was originally a manifestation of the extremely powerful physical power to the extreme. There was no need to waste time mobilizing genuine qi or think about any martial arts technique. It was just a simple bombardment of power until the opponent had no strength to fight back. At this time, Xianyuan Wushuang felt this way. He only chose to take a step back, but he fell into the opponent's series of violent attacks. He had never seen such a fighting method, so he was directly stunned by the series of attacks. "Get out of my way!" Xianyuan Wushuang roared. The 9 dragons on the High Heaven Dragon Subduing Halberd merged into one, and the power broke out to the extreme. But once Lu Fengxian entered this state, the violent fighting intent even affected his own will a little. The demonic tattoos on his body became brighter and brighter, which made Chu Xiu's expression change. Is Lu Fengxian going to use that move? Fortunately, Lu Fengxian was still rational. Before the demonic tattoos on his body broke out to the extreme, his halberd had already fallen. Qin Baiyuan's expression changed. He reached out to stop it, but it was too late. The speed of this pure physical power was too fast, so fast that even an expert in the martial immortal realm could not stop it. The powerful power condensed on the unparalleled halberd, and the extreme physical power exploded in an instant. The High Heaven Dragon Subduing Halberd was directly knocked away, and the crescent blades on the halberd cracked. Xianyuan Wushuang was also sent flying out of the arena by Lu Fengxian's attack. He hit the formation and spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 1185. Xianyuan Wushuang was defeated miserably. Only the sound of LV Fengxian's heavy breathing could be heard. The demonic tattoos on his body slowly began to dissipate, but it was not like last time, where his body was on the verge of collapse. After all, this time he was only borrowing Wushuang's power. In Chu Xiu's view, Xianyuan Wushuang was miserable. It was undeniable that Xianyuan Wushuang was indeed a genius, who had forcibly turned a useless person's physique into a peerless genius's. However, he was really unlucky. Compared with Lu Fengxian, who had unparalleled luck, there was simply no comparison between them. Last time he met Chu Xiu, he had to summon the Marquis Lu Wenho's fighting soul. As a result, he was restrained by Chu Xiu and almost lost his strength. This time, he was truly unlucky. Although he had used his full strength right from the start, he had encountered LV Fengxian, who had just erupted and her strength had soared by a large margin. Thus, he was directly suppressed to death and didn't even have the chance to retaliate. In terms of realm, Shenyuan Wushuang was actually stronger than Lu Fengxian. After all, he had reached the peak of the true fire spirit refinement realm. Unfortunately, in the previous battle against Sabodhi Monastery, LV Fengxian had used her absolute physical strength to slay the Adumbra Brahma. Even Chu Xiu had been shocked by that kind of strength. It could be said to be the limit of physical strength. This time, although Lu Fengxian did not use the full version of Wushuang, he only borrowed a part of it, which was enough for Shenyuan Wushuang to suffer. However, Shenyuan Wushuang had some foundation. Even if he was beaten by Lu Fengxian and vomited blood, he still struggled to get up, unwilling to give up and wanted to continue to fight. He still had a few trump cards and secret skills of High Heaven Sect that he had not used yet. At this time, Qin Baiyuan shouted in a low voice, "Enough! Isn't it shameful enough? A loss is a loss. My High Heaven Sect can afford to lose, yet you still want to pester us? Are you prepared to lose face for yourself or High Heaven Sect?" Shenyuan Wushuang glared at Lu Fengxian, but he had to step back after hearing Qin Baiyuan, who had always been protective of him, said so. However, his eyes were still flickering with unwillingness. He was sullen. Last time when he fought with Chu Xiu, he lost inexplicably. This time, it was the same with Lu Fengxian. Lu Fengxian was simply a monster. Her series of attacks did not even give him a chance to fight back. She defeated him with absolute strength. At this time, Qin Baiyuan looked at Lu Fengxian and said in a deep voice, "Young man, not bad. What a strong physical body. I wonder which successor you are?" Everyone turned to look at Lu Fengxian. Regardless of whether Lu Fengxian was a nobody or not, he would be famous in the East Territory from now on based on the fact that he defeated Shenyuan Wushuang so easily. Lu Fengxian cupped his hands and said, "I'm also the successor of Gu Zun. My bloodline inherited the cultivation method of the ancient demon god Marquis Lu Wenho." Hearing LV Fengxian's words, everyone present gasped softly, and their faces were filled with surprise. Marquis Lu Wenho was very famous even in the Daluotian world. After all, he had once fought against the whole Jianghu with his own strength. Lu Fengxian turned out to be the successor of this bloodline. No wonder his physical strength was so strong and his attainments in halberd were so high. At the thought of this, everyone subconsciously looked at Shenyuan Wushuang. That was a painful slap to the face. Previously, Shenyuan Wushuang said to Lu Fengxian that he wanted to teach him the true halberd. Who would have thought that his master was from the bloodline of Marquis Lu Wenho? Who would dare to compare with Marquis Lu Wenho when it came to halberd? Lu Jianghu walked out and stretched his limbs. He pointed at Yin Xueli and said, "Come, come, come. That guy who doesn't look like a good person, it's our turn." Yin Xueli laughed coldly and said, "You're courting death." Everyone present had a strange expression. Where did the Imperial Sky Pavilion find such a weirdo? Lu Jianghu even said that Yin Xueli didn't look like a good person. In fact, his appearance was very upright, but because of the cultivation method, his temperament was slightly more feminine. As for Lu Jianghu, he used to be a bandit and a pirate. Later on, he became the Hall Master of the Kunlun Devil cult twice. He was the one who really didn't look like a good person. Regarding this battle, they still believed that Yin Xueli would win. It should be said that Yin Xueli had a 100% chance of winning. Yin Xueli had reached the heaven and earth mystic illumination realm not long ago, and the guy from the Imperial Sky Pavilion was only at the true fire spirit refinement realm. Previously, when Lu Fengxian fought with Shenyuan Wushuang, it could be said that they were at the same level. However, this time, it was a standard battle between those who were at a higher level. Speaking of which, it was a little like bullying. However, Chu Xiu wasn't worried because he knew that Lu Jianghu should know what to do. This guy might look rough, but in fact he was very sneaky. He wouldn't do things that required his life, and he wouldn't do things that he wasn't confident in. Seeing how he agreed so quickly, Chu Xiu knew that Lu Jianghe should be confident. Indeed, when Lu Jianghe and Yin Xueli started fighting, everyone realized that Lu Jianghe's cultivation technique was extremely similar to Yin Xueli's. Both of them used cultivation techniques that manipulated the power of blood to battle. However, Yin Xueli's cultivation technique leaned towards the evil and tyrannical path, which was a standard demonic technique. While Lu Jianghe's blood divine demonic technique had the same attributes, it had a hint of mysticism. Yin Xueli's blood-colored domain opened up and enveloped Lu Jianghe within it. Then he started to suppress and beat him up. Using the heaven and earth mystic illumination realm to fight against the true fire spirit refinement realm, the effect of the domain was the most obvious. Once the domain was opened, one would be almost invincible. After all, not everyone was like Chu Xiu, who had the formation breaking technique and could easily shatter the domain. Yin Xueli sneered and said, "You dare to clamor with me with such little strength? You're simply courting death. Seeing that your cultivation technique is actually similar to my blood river cults, you're just showing off after learning a little bit. What a joke." Lu Jianghe said disdainfully, "Little bit? When it comes to controlling the power of vitality, I'm your ancestor. You'll know in a while who's the real little bit." After fighting for such a long time, Lu Jianghe had more or less figured out Yin Xueli's martial arts path. Although this blood river cult's martial arts looked similar to his, it was not the same as the blood divine demonic technique. "Stubborn!" Yin Xueli snorted coldly. The domain around him began to shrink rapidly, and finally turned into a 1,000-foot-long blood river, which directly enveloped Lu Jianghe. In the blood river, endless blood threads bound Lu Jianghe's entire body and began to devour his vitality crazily. In an instant, Lu Jianghe's entire body shrunk by a large margin. This was no longer a spar, but a battle to the death. However, High Heaven Sect did not say a word. Because of the previous conflict, Qin Baiyuan and the others were not very pleased with Chu Xiu and the others. Moreover, Imperial Sky Pavilion had not said anything yet, so what were they so anxious about? Right now, Lu Sanjin was actually very anxious. Although he felt that Chu Xiu's subordinate had a foul mouth and liked to spout nonsense when he had nothing better to do, he was representing the Imperial Sky Pavilion, after all. He could not just watch Lu Jianghe die here. However, before Lu Sanjin could call for a pause, Chu Xiu pressed his hand down and said indifferently, "Calm down. Old Lu won't be defeated so easily. Let's just watch." Lu Sanjin had a face of suspicion. At this moment, Lu Jianghe was about to be sucked dry, but Chu Xiu still said that he had not lost. Did he have to wait until Lu Jianghe was dead before he lost? At this moment, Lu Jianghe was indeed in a miserable state. Almost all of his vitality had been sucked away by Yin Xueli. All that was left of his body was skin and bones, just like a mummy. Yin Xueli sneered and said, "I didn't expect you to have such a rich vitality even though you have yet to reach the heaven and earth mystic opening realm. Not bad, not bad. No wonder you could block so many of my moves. However, you made a mistake by provoking me. Today is High Heaven Sect's celebration, and it is not a good time to kill someone. For the sake of High Heaven Sect, I will spare your life." At this moment, Lu Jianghe said with a strange smile, "Idiot, do you really think this lord's vitality is so easy to swallow?" As Lu Jianghe's voice fell, Yin Xueli suddenly let out a miserable howl, and his face began to distort. Hot, scorching hot. The vitality in his body began to boil, and his entire body began to boil intensely from the inside out. In the eyes of others, Yin Xueli was extremely strange. The skin all over his body began to writhe and move as though he was a living creature. At this moment, even if Yin Xueli had the cultivation of the heaven and earth mystic opening realm, it was useless. He could not even use a trace of his cultivation. The warriors of the Church of Blood River controlled the power of vitality, and they could also devour the vitality of others and refine it into their own power. Hence, not long after Ancestor Blood River rose, he had already reached the realm of a half-step martial immortal. Although Yin Xueli's talent was not considered weak, it was at least inferior to Xianyuan Wushuang and Lu Sanjin. However, by relying on the warriors of the Church of Blood River, he had stepped into the heaven and earth mystic opening realm earlier than them. To others, the cultivation technique of the Church of Blood River was incomparably evil. However, to Lu Jianghe, it was extremely crude. One had to know that his blood demon divine technique could mobilize the power of every drop of blood. Every drop of blood was a clone of Lu Jianghe. As long as Lu Jianghe's true spirit was still present, he could be revived with just a drop of blood. This level of miraculousness was far from what the cultivation technique of the Church of Blood River could compare to. If Lu Jianghe were to fight against ordinary Tao, Buddhist, or sword sex ethereal enlightenment realm martial artists, he might not be killed, but he would definitely be beaten up. However, against Yin Xueli, Lu Jianghe could completely suppress him across realms. Seeing that Yin Xueli's body was about to explode, Lu Jianghe curled his lips and retracted his power of vitality. He knew what kind of situation they were in. If he were to kill someone, High Heaven Sect would definitely intervene. In an instant, the fresh blood flowed back into Lu Jianghe's body. It even brought along a large portion of Yin Xueli's vitality, allowing him to instantly return to his original state. His aura even strengthened quite a bit. Looking at Yin Xueli, who was lying on the ground like a dried corpse, breathing in but not exhaling, Lu Jianghe licked his lips and laughed. The vitality of an expert of the heaven and earth mystic opening realm is indeed rich. I am very satisfied. Looking around, Lu Jianghe met everyone's surprised gaze and raised his head proudly. Remember, I am not a nobody. I am the blood demon venerable, Lu Jianghe. Chapter 1186. Chu Xiu did not let Lu Jianghe show off on stage for too long and pulled him down. As for Lu Jianghe's victory, Chu Xiu did not find it strange at all. After all, he had also cultivated the blood demon power technique. He could almost see the crudeness and flaws of Xueli's technique at a glance. Of course, Lu Jianghe had nothing to be proud of. The blood demon technique was powerful not only because of Lu Jianghe's efforts, but also because of Dugu Weiwei's efforts. Back in the Kunlun devil cult, Dugu Weiwei had helped his subordinates perfect their techniques. Although the blood demon technique was Lu Jianghe's original creation, Dugu Weiwei's guidance and help in perfecting the technique were definitely indispensable. At Dugu Weiwei's level, he might only need to say a word to make the blood demon technique's strength surpass the blood river cult's technique. Qi Wuhan's face darkened as he ordered people to carry Yin Xueli, who was lying on the ground and almost drained of all his blood, away. Originally, he thought that Yin Xueli's attack would be a sure win. Who would have thought that Yin Xueli was so useless that he was beaten half to death by a true fire spirit refinement realm warrior? Moreover, this matter was troublesome. He was the one who instigated Yin Xueli to find trouble with the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Now that Yin Xueli was almost crippled, his protective master, Blood River Patriarch, would definitely come to find trouble with him. Although Qi Wuhan was not afraid, he did not want to get involved in such a matter. After all, the Blood River cult was on the side of Cold River City. After 2 consecutive victories, everyone looked at Chu Xiu in a different light. They did not know who Lu Jianghe and Lu Fengxian were, but in their opinion, since they were on the side of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, they were all members of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Although the Imperial Sky Pavilion seemed to be declining right now, it still had some foundation. Just as Lu Sanjin was about to step forward, Chu Xiu pressed down on his shoulder and said, "I'll go first in this battle. You're the Imperial Sky Pavilion's Eastern Region advisor, so you represent the entire Imperial Sky Pavilion. Naturally, you'll be the one to fight the final battle." Yuan Fu walked out with his sword in hand and said coldly, "Don't worry, it will be the next round soon." Chu Xiu nodded in understanding and said, "That's right, it will be very soon." It was a fact that none of Gu Zun's descendants were weak. Even if Yuan Fu was dressed like a big green leaf and looked very funny, he was not an easy person to deal with. However, Chu Xiu was not easy to deal with either. Yuan Fu's hand gripped his green longsword. At this moment, Yuan Fu's aura suddenly changed. Even if some people thought he was arrogant and others thought he was funny, There was only one aura that Yuan Fu displayed at this moment, and that was boundless sharpness. The sword was unsheathed, and its sharpness shook the heavens. In an instant, even the vital energy of the heaven and earth within 300 feet of Yuan Fu became extremely sharp. Under Yuan Fu's control, any power turned into an extremely sharp sword that slashed at Chu Xiu. As soon as the sword was unsheathed, a sword domain was formed. The sword path of Sword Venerable Ling Tian's lineage did not contain any special attributes. The path of Sword Venerable Ling Tian seemed to be able to unleash the sharpness of the sword path to the extreme. Deep within the boundless sword domain, the formation-breaking sword in Chu Xiu's hand erupted with an even more powerful sharpness. The ethereal slash and the sword intent of the formation-breaking sword fused together perfectly. The edge of the blade distorted the laws and tore apart the domain. Messy sword chi danced in all directions. A loud explosion rang out and a powerful shockwave spread out in all directions. Even the surrounding formations were activated to the maximum. Xianyuan Wushuang, who was sitting below with a pale face, became even paler when he saw this scene. There was even a faint look of disbelief on his face. How long had it been since he last fought with Chu Xiu? How did Chu Xiu's strength increase so quickly? Yuan Fu's expression also changed slightly. Although he was arrogant, he would always use his full strength when he fought. This was his habit and the way his lineage had always fought. If he was defeated because he underestimated his opponent, it would be the greatest insult to the lineage of Sword Venerable Ling Tian, as well as the sword in his hand. In the end, even so, Chu Xiu was still evenly matched with him. Moreover, from the powerful force that came from the long sword, he could sense that Chu Xiu's physical strength was even stronger than his. Yuan Fu turned the long sword in his hand, and in an instant, thousands of sword shadows separated and fell from the sky. The power on each sword shadow seemed to be real, and each sword shadow contained incomparable sharpness. Although the sword principle of Sword Venerable Ling Tian's lineage was strong, Chu Xiu's attainments in the sword principle were not inferior to Yuan Fu's. Moreover, in terms of strength, Chu Xiu was even better than Yuan Fu. After all, apart from the fact that he did not have a domain, he was no different from an existence in the profound understanding state. The formation-breaking sword slashed down, but it was not aimed at Yuan Fu, but at the ground. The powerful saber light penetrated the ground. Even the formation in the martial arts practice field of High Heaven sect could not stop this power. In an instant, the powerful saber light penetrated the ground like an earth dragon turning over, wrapping Yuan Fu in it. 7 limits, Earth Destruction. This was the first time Chu Xiu used the Earth Destruction sword since he obtained it from the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Its power was indeed much more amazing than the Sea Destruction sword he had mastered before. One was Ling Tian, one was Earth Destruction. The sword shadows from above and the saber light from below collided with each other, and the powerful energy fluctuations condensed into a storm that swept through the surrounding area. Without the protection of the spirit array, it would have easily pierced through High Heaven City. Qin Baiyuan raised his eyebrows and said, "Earth Destruction of the Heaven swallowing Earth 7 limits? Interesting, this boy actually cultivates this kind of evil secret art. Is he not afraid of karma?" The reputation of the Heaven swallowing Earth 7 limits was quite big in the Daluotian world, but it only existed in legends. Moreover, legends were a bit too terrifying, and the few remaining 7 limits only existed in the hands of some top sects. They did not lack secret arts, so naturally they would not cultivate this thing. Yang Kai did not expect to see one in Chu Xiu's body today. When the dust settled, Yuan Fu spoke with a gloomy expression. "I didn't expect that I would really underestimate you. There aren't many among the primeval sovereign's successors who are proficient in the Saber Dao. Whose successor are you? But it doesn't matter, since you can force me to." Before Yuan Fu could finish speaking, Chu Xiu had already formed a seal with both hands, and pure demon chi spread around him. In an instant, the heaven-weeping blood rain fell, and the demon chi giant hand tore through the void, grabbing at Yuan Fu. Chu Xiu did not have the time to listen to Yuan Fu's nagging. If he had the time to talk, why not just use his sword? The demon god giant hand descended from the sky. In his shock, Yuanfu's long sword bloomed with light and grabbed at the demon god giant hand, forcibly using the sharpness of the sword Dao to resist the power of the Great Compassion mantra. But at this time, the demon god giant hand exploded in Chu Xiu's hand, and 3 triple destruction city arrows burst out in succession, but halfway through, they transformed into 6, 9, and then countless triple destruction city arrows. The aura on each triple destruction city arrow was incomparably real, and the power of nirvanic extermination on them seemed to want to corrode all power. This move of Chu Xiu gave everyone present a big fright. No one thought that Chu Xiu's extremely fierce and domineering martial Dao path could actually use such a terrifying illusion art. On the grandstand, Linghu Xianshan suddenly raised his eyebrows. Qin Baiyuan glanced at him and said, "You recognize this kind of illusion art?" Linghu Xianshan nodded and said, "I've seen it before, condensing illusion into reality. An old friend from the Sanskrit religion used it before. It was indeed very astonishing. Even I couldn't tell whether this kind of illusion art is real or fake." "Oh. When you were at Heaven and Earth Mystic Opening Realm, you actually couldn't beat the other party." Qin Baiyuan was somewhat surprised. Linghu Xianshan shook his head and said, "Of course I can beat him. If I want to kill him, it's a piece of cake. I told him at the beginning that no matter how real an illusion art is, it's still fake. Only one's own strength is the only thing that matters." Unfortunately, he was too stubborn. Because of this stubbornness, he indeed cultivated his illusion art to a superb level, but this also meant that he could never go any further. That old friend of mine also participated in my High Heaven Sex martial arts show not long ago and should have returned to the Western domain's Sanskrit religion by now. But why does this Chu Xiu know his secret art? Is there some kind of karmic relationship between him and the Sanskrit religion? Linghu Xianshan was still puzzled, but at this time, Yuanfu felt extremely dangerous. He couldn't tell whether these arrows were real or fake. The arrows had clearly turned from real to fake right in front of his eyes, but he couldn't tell which was real and which was fake. Seeing that those arrows with the power of nirvanic extermination were already in front of him, in the next moment, Yuanfu suddenly gritted his teeth. From the pores all over his body, traces of blood qi floated out. Those blood qi that could not be seen by the naked eye were extremely sharp, faintly emitting a trace of sword qi. They tore through all the power in front of them, including those 3 Annihilation City arrows. They were also forcefully torn apart. Yuanfu's sword Dao had already been cultivated to the bones. From top to bottom, everything in his body could be condensed into incomparably sharp sword qi. However, when the blood-colored sword qi dissipated, those 3 Annihilation City arrows were all shattered. Yuanfu's heart sank. Because he did not feel any power blocking. All of the arrows were all fake. With a loud bang, 3 Annihilation City arrows rose from under Yuanfu's feet and directly exploded on his body. In an instant his protective sword qi was torn apart, and the world-annihilating fire engulfed his whole body. As soon as the power was released, the power of the Great Compassion mantra suddenly increased. The demon god's giant hand suddenly collapsed, and Yuanfu immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. At this time, Chu Xiu's figure had already appeared in front of Yuanfu. With one slash, Yuanfu spat out another mouthful of blood. When the second slash landed, the hand that was holding the sword began to tremble, and the flesh cracked. By the time Chu Xiu slashed out the 3rd time, the long sword had already fallen out of his hand. His whole body was directly sent flying by Chu Xiu's slash, and his whole body hit the formation. Chapter 1187. In Chu Xiu's opinion, Yuanfu's strength was not bad, but that was all. He had just stepped into the mysterious heaven and earth realm not long ago, so his accumulation of power was not deep. Although the martial arts of swordsman Ling Tian's lineage were indeed extraordinary, he did not seem to have much experience in fighting. One could tell from his moves that he had more than enough sharpness, but not enough killing intent. If Chu Xiu said that he was 100% sure of defeating such an opponent, it would be too conceited. It would be more like 99%. In the end, Chu Xiu did not even have to use his divine sense before Yuanfu was defeated by Chu Xiu. It was almost a crushing defeat. Qi Wuhan's eyes revealed a trace of fear. When he first fought Chu Xiu, he felt that Chu Xiu was a great threat. In fact, in his opinion, Chu Xiu was even greater than the entire Imperial Sky Pavilion. At that time, he tried to persuade Yi Weikong to fight with Chu Xiu, but he was forced back by the Prime Master behind him. From the looks of it now, his worries weren't wrong. Chu Xiu's growth speed was simply too fast. Although he hadn't used his full strength, Qi Wuhan had a feeling that the current Chu Xiu was even stronger than the Chu Xiu he had fought in the past. Chu Xiu retreated and patted Lu Sanjin on the shoulder. Whether I can enter the Divine Cloud Realm or not depends on you. In fact, Chu Xiu trusted Lu Sanjin. He trusted him as a person and trusted the old pavilion master's judgment. All along, Lu Sanjin had given people a feeling that he was not reliable and that he had a glib tongue. But in fact, Lu Sanjin had been the Eastern region wayfarer for so many years, and even Jianghu, an expert of the mysterious heaven and earth realm, treated him politely. How could he be easy to deal with? At least, for a long time, Chu Xiu had not seen Lu Sanjin use his full strength. Lu Sanjin's character was very similar to that of Feng Qishao. However, the difference was that Feng Qishao was really funny. That was how his character was. As for Lu Sanjin, he pretended not to be serious, but in reality he had more things on his shoulders than anyone else. Perhaps he could only use this kind of cheeky attitude to cover it up. Lu Sanjin nodded with a dignified expression. Chu Xiu had helped the Imperial Heaven Pavilion enough. He had already won 3 rounds. If he lost the last one and caused Chu Xiu to lose the qualification to cultivate in the Divine Cloud Realm, he would feel sorry for Chu Xiu. Moreover, aside from Chu Xiu, this battle also concerned the dignity of the Emperor's Sky Pavilion and the Cold River City. Qi Wuhan was the heir of Cold River City and had long been a famous figure in the East Domain. Meanwhile, Lu Sanjin was also the heir of the Imperial Sky Pavilion and the Eastern Region Wayfarer. Although he was slightly less famous than Qi Wuhan, he was still someone to be reckoned with. Therefore, the loser of this battle would lose the dignity of the whole sect. Strictly speaking, it was normal for Qi Wuhan to be a little older than Lu Sanjin and have a higher cultivation. However, most people in Jianghu would not be fair and considerate when judging things. At this time, Yin Lingzi, who had been sitting beside Lu Sanjin, suddenly said, "Brother Lu, don't be too stubborn about some things." Yin Lingzi was a member of the Spirit Treasure Temple, so it was not appropriate for him to intervene in the dispute between the two sections. Therefore, he just watched the battle without saying anything. At this time, he felt that Lu Sanjin actually had a desperate killing intent. He seemed to have guessed Lu Sanjin's thoughts and could not help but advise him. Lu Sanjin shook his head with a wry smile and said, "Thank you, fellow Taoist Yin Lingzi. However, there are some things that I have to be stubborn about." As Lu Sanjin's voice fell, he directly walked out and stood on the martial arts practice field. Qi Wuhan's eyes showed a touch of surprise. "Lu Sanjin, I didn't expect you to really dare to stand up today. You should know that you have no chance of winning against me. The gap of a great realm is not so easy to make up for." As the Eastern Territory wayfarer of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, Qi Wuhan naturally knew that Lu Sanjin was very strong. However, no matter how strong he was, he could only fight an ordinary heaven and earth profound enlightenment cultivator at most. Qi Wuhan, on the other hand, was not ordinary. Lu Sanjin said lightly, "Just because I have no chance of winning doesn't mean I dare not fight. Just like your Cold River City came here aggressively, didn't you also have to go back without accomplishing anything? If you want to destroy my Imperial Sky Pavilion, Yi Weikong can't do it, and neither can your generation." "You're very confident." Qi Wuhan's eyes flashed with murderous intent. This was real murderous intent. This was the founding celebration of the High Heaven sect. The martial arts gambling fight had always been a tradition. Everyone resolved some conflicts, and at the same time, it was also a way to show the strength of their respective sections. Therefore, even if there were accidental injuries, no one had ever killed anyone. Now that Cold River City had shed all pretense of cordiality with the Imperial Sky Pavilion, they naturally didn't have to worry so much. Qi Wuhan really wanted to kill Lu Sanjin. The Imperial Sky Pavilion itself was already rotten. If the next successor died here, then the Imperial Sky Pavilion would really have no hope. Even if he risked the wrath of the High Heaven sect, it was still worth it as long as he could kill Lu Sanjin. Anyway, the relationship between his Cold River City and the High Heaven sect was not very good. While Qi Wuhan was still thinking whether it was worth killing Lu Sanjin or not, Lu Sanjin had already made his move. He flicked his sleeves, and 4 small swords slashed at Qi Wuhan. 2 of the small swords carried the power of yin and yang, and the other 2 carried the power of heaven and earth. The combination of the 4 attributes was like a sword array, and a large array was laid out under the entire martial arts practice field. As the small swords surged, a powerful aura carried a sword aura storm and slashed at Qi Wuhan. 4 supreme sword array? Is that all you've got? Yin and yang heaven and earth is infinitely close to the power of the principal origin, but unfortunately, it's still not enough. Your own power is not enough. Qi Wuhan directly opened his domain, and a blizzard instantly descended. Every wisp of storm was stained with a layer of sharpness, and it instantly swept the entire martial arts practice field. A sound of metal clashing came. Lu Sanjin felt the power on his 4 small swords was getting weaker and weaker, and his expression suddenly changed. Before he could react, a huge frost dragon suddenly emerged from the boundless storm. Qi Wuhan held the dragon's tail in his hand, and the dragon's body was straight, stabbing at Lu Sanjin like a big spear. Lu Sanjin wanted to dodge, but at the next moment, a chill spread around him. He realized that the blood and qi in his body seemed to be frozen, and he was unable to move a single step. With a loud shout, Lu Sanjin's body shone with golden energy. He formed a seal with his hands, and the Imperial Heaven Pavilion's secret technique, the Imperial Heaven Treasure Seal, condensed in front of him. The huge seal covered the sky, but it was used to block Qi Wuhan's frost dragon spear. With a loud bang, the Imperial Heaven Treasure Seal shattered, and Lu Sanjin was sent flying by the spear. Blood flowed uncontrollably from his mouth. At the sight of this, everyone present could not help but shake their heads. The difference in power foundation was too great. In the previous battles, Lu Fengxian had fought against Xianyuan Wushuang. Although his power foundation was not as strong as Xianyuan Wushuang's, his physical strength was extremely shocking, and it was enough to make up for the weakness in the power of his qi. When Lu Jiang he fought against Yin Xueli, he had just entered the mysterious heaven and earth realm, and his power foundation was not much stronger than Lu Jianghe's. Moreover, his technique was completely restrained, so it was normal for him to lose. As for Chu Xiu, he was not an ordinary person. His power foundation was even stronger than Yuan Fu, who had already reached the mysterious heaven and earth realm. Now, it was Lu Sanjin's turn. As the Eastern Region Travel Advisor and the future heir of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, although his own strength was not bad, he was much weaker than Qi Wuhan in terms of strength and foundation. It was a situation where he was completely suppressed. At this moment, Qi Wuhan had heavily injured Lu Sanjin with a single strike of his spear. He directly waved his hand, and the boundless ice storm within his domain instantly wrapped around the 4 tiny swords. After that, he took a step forward while layers of ice appeared around him, and then he smashed his fist down towards Lu Sanjin. Another loud bang was heard, and Lu Sanjin was sent flying. What followed was basically a series of beatings. In the face of absolute power, Lu Sanjin did not have the ability to fight back at all. Lu Jiang he shook his head and said, "Hehehe, that's terrible. This kid is a little weak, and he can't take it anymore." Chu Xiu said nonchalantly, "Don't worry, it's still early. How can the heir of a top sect like the Imperial Heaven Pavilion not have any trump cards?" At this time, Qi Wuhan's eyes even revealed a hint of killing intent. He was considering whether he should kill Lu Sanjin in public on such an occasion. But at this moment, Lu Sanjin, who had been suppressed by him all this while, suddenly had an extremely powerful force emerge from his body. It even dyed his eyes a golden color. By the time Qi Wuhan felt that something was wrong, Lu Sanjin's body had swelled up. His loose robe was torn apart, revealing a part of his skin that was covered in golden demonic patterns. There was a divine light in Lu Sanjin's eyes, and it instantly penetrated Qi Wuhan's mind, causing him to wail in pain. That was purely an injury to the primordial spirit. Caught off guard, Qi Wuhan did not even have time to defend himself. He did not know that Lu Sanjin knew a primordial spirit's secret technique. At that moment, Lu Sanjin rushed up and hugged Qi Wuhan. He threw punches at him. The powerful force was like that of a demon, and it shook the entire martial arts field with loud bangs. Qi Wuhan wanted to break free, but he was shocked to find that the golden demonic patterns on Lu Sanjin's body had sealed all his essential qi and qi. Even his domain was beginning to dissipate. Moreover, that thing was extremely hot. It was as if it was a brand that was going to be branded from Lu Sanjin's body to his body. Qi Wuhan was shocked. A bloody mist appeared around him, and a part of his vital energy and blood erupted. Only then did he break free from Lu Sanjin's embrace. However, at the next moment, the demonic patterns around Lu Sanjin's body shone extremely brightly. He threw a punch and directly blasted Qi Wuhan out of the martial arts field, shattering the formation. Yin Lingzi's eyes revealed a hint of surprise, and he mumbled, "Royal Heavenly Treasure Body." Brother Lu's main cultivation is actually the Royal Heavenly Treasure Body. He's really bold. Chapter 1188. As Chu Xiu cultivated the heaven's sun gazing at air skill, his spiritual sense was strong. Therefore, when he saw Lu Sanjin for the first time, he felt that there was something on Lu Sanjin's body. His strength was definitely not simple. However, he did not expect Lu Sanjin's outburst to be so ferocious that even Qi Wuhan could not withstand it. To be more precise, it was not that Lu Sanjin could not withstand it, but the strange golden demonic marks on his body had actually blocked Qi Wuhan's realm and qi. Chu Xiu turned to look at Yin Lingzi and asked, "Brother Yin Lingzi, do you recognize what Brother Lu is performing now?" Yin Lingzi looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. "You're from the Imperial Sky Pavilion, but you don't even know what's on your own?" Although he was a little confused, he still explained in detail. The Imperial Heavenly Treasure Body is the most powerful secret skill of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. It's also the core secret skill of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. It was said that it originated from the ancient demonic gods. The Royal Heaven Pavilion's ancestor had found the remains of an ancient demonic god, then imprinted demonic prints on the remains and refined them into his own body, thus forming the Royal Heavenly Treasure physique. With the demonic marks, apart from the purest physical strength, it can block all other powers. It's extremely powerful. Although it's not a perfect cultivation skill, it can suppress most people's cultivation skills. It's a pity that this cultivation skill was lost later on. Chu Xiu pointed at Lu Sanjin in surprise and said, "Didn't you say that he's cultivating the Imperial Heavenly Treasure Body now? Moreover, this cultivation skill is the core cultivation skill of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. How can it be lost?" Yin Lingzi explained, "Right now, Brother Lu's cultivation is actually forcefully cultivating. The things of the ancient demon god only belong to the ancient demon god. If humans cultivate it without permission, they'll attract great trouble. Therefore, the ancestors of the Imperial Sky Pavilion spent a few generations to come up with a body-tempering secret skill. It's specifically used to withstand the backlash of the Imperial Heavenly Treasure Body. However, before the great ancient calamity, the Imperial Sky Pavilion encountered a huge crisis. Although they managed to pull through in the end, that body-tempering technique was lost. Therefore, there were fewer and fewer people cultivating this technique in the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Even if they cultivated it, they wouldn't be able to use it normally and would have to bear the backlash of the demonic marks. They would be crippled after using it for a few times. Fortunately, the Imperial Sky Pavilion has many secret skills. Even without the Imperial Heavenly Treasure Body, it can still become a great sect. I didn't expect that the Royal Heavenly Treasure physique, which hasn't appeared in the pugilistic world for a very long time, would appear once again. Based on Brother Lu's appearance, he's already completed cultivating this cultivation technique, and it's obvious how much pain he suffered during this process. Moreover, the slightest carelessness could cause his entire body to be crippled. Ling 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 Spirit, Spirit. Ling's spirit cheeses Chu's spirit. After hearing Yin Lingzi's words, Chu Xiu also felt that Lu Sanjin was really going all out. The backlash from the royal heavenly treasure body was simply comparable to a divine ability. Chi time Lu Li Jin had Lu Chi and Wan, Jin Chi Wan Jin had time. Chi Wu Hen struggled to get up from the martial arts practice field, but he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. He was sent flying by Lu Sanjin's imperial heavenly treasure body due to a moment of carelessness. In fact, he had suffered some injuries. However, compared to Lu Sanjin, who was completely defenseless, he still had some combat power left. Therefore, Chi Wu Hen wore a ferocious expression and wanted to get up to fight again. At this moment, Chu Xiu said coldly, "Is life and death also necessary in a martial arts duel? You've been sent flying out of the arena, and it's still not considered a loss? Chi Wu Hen, if you're not convinced, you can increase the stakes. I'll play with you." At this moment, Qin Baiyuan coughed and said, "Okay, today is the High Heaven Sect's celebration. It's not appropriate to kill someone. Chi Wu Hen, your Cold River City can afford to lose, right?" Hearing Qin Baiyuan's words, Chi Wu Hen snorted and retreated. At the same time, he blamed himself for underestimating his opponent. However, he didn't expect that Lu Sanjin, as the Eastern Territory partner and the next successor of the Emperor Heaven Pavilion, would take such a risk to cultivate this kind of secret art. It didn't make sense. Caught off guard, it was too late for him to counterattack. If it was a life and death battle, he, Lu Sanjin, would already be dead. Chu Xiu asked someone to bring Lu Sanjin, who was on the verge of death, down to Lu Jianghu and Lu Fengxian for the time being. He then cupped his fists at Qin Baiyuan and said, "It seems that I've won this round. High Heaven Sect should be willing to admit defeat, right?" Qin Baiyuan snorted coldly and said, "Don't worry, my High Heaven Sect can afford to lose." After saying that, Qin Baiyuan looked at the crowd and said indifferently, "Who else wants to participate in the martial arts duel?" Everyone present looked at each other, but no one said anything. In fact, there were many people who were willing to participate in the martial arts duel in the past. In any case, they could get some prizes just by going on stage, so why not? It was just that this year's martial arts duel was a bit too bloody. Several big sects had already gone all out, so they felt that something was wrong, but they didn't dare to jump out again. Seeing that no one wanted to continue participating, Qin Baiyuan said a few more polite words, and High Heaven Sect's celebration was announced to be over. Some sects chose to leave directly, while some sects wanted to curry favor with High Heaven Sect, so they stayed to flatter them. Lu Sanjin's injury had not yet healed, so he was taken away by Lu Jianghu and Lu Fengxian to rest, while Chu Xiu was taken by Qin Baiyuan into the spirit cloud realm to cultivate. This was the first time that Chu Xiu was so close to Dugu Weiwei, and for some reason, he felt a burst of excitement in his heart. Since he transmigrated to the present, there were many riddles that he had been puzzled about. Perhaps he would be able to solve them today. Even with Chu Xiu's state of mind cultivation, he couldn't help feeling a little excited. Qin Baiyuan led Chu Xiu to open several spirit array gates, and each spirit array could make Chu Xiu feel extremely powerful. It was easy to imagine how strict the security of this place was. After opening the last spirit array gate, a space portal appeared in front of Chu Xiu. Qin Baiyuan said in a deep voice, "I will open the spirit array later, and you can enter directly. However, you can only stay inside for 7 days. It's not that my High Heaven Sect is stingy, but the Yuan Qi accumulated in the spirit cloud realm during this period will dissipate within 7 days after it is opened. If the entrance is not closed within 7 days, it will cause more world Yuan Qi to dissipate, which will affect the source of this blessed land." Chu Xiu nodded. He wasn't really going there for cultivation, he just wanted to find an answer. 7 days was enough. At this time, Qin Baiyuan suddenly said with a solemn expression, "There is one more thing you have to remember. The spirit cloud realm is not only the blessed land with the densest Yuan Qi in the Imperial Sky Pavilion, but there is also an extremely terrifying existence sealed inside. Although it is still sealed, no one knows what will happen if you get close to it. So, you can enter and cultivate, but you can only stay within 1,000 feet of it. Don't go deeper. Otherwise, if something happens to you and you die inside, even if your Master Guzun and the Imperial Sky Pavilion come to me to ask for you, it will be useless. Chu Xiu nodded in understanding. At this time, Qin Baiyuan also opened the spirit array, and Chu Xiu immediately entered it without saying anything. The moment he stepped into the spirit cloud realm, Chu Xiu's eyes were immediately wrapped in a thick fog. To be precise, it was not a thick fog, but the world Yuan Qi that was so thick that it had even formed a liquid fog. Cultivating in such a dense world Yuan Qi, every time he breathed, it was like swallowing a level 7 or 8 elixir. In the past, Chu Xiu would definitely not waste any time and immediately began to cultivate. However, at this time, Chu Xiu was not in the mood for this. His heart had begun to throb violently. He had a feeling that what he was looking for was right in front of him, right there. This feeling guided his footsteps forward. Although Qin Baiyuan had instructed Chu Xiu not to enter the depths of the forest, Chu Xiu had long since thrown these words to who knows where. At this time, although Chu Xiu was walking according to his feelings, his mental strength was also extremely tense, and he did not dare to relax at all. The further he went, the thicker the fog became. The surroundings were extremely quiet, and only the sound of Chu Xiu's footsteps could be heard, as if he was walking in a boundless void. At this moment, a voice suddenly rang in his ears. "You're finally here. You're faster than I thought." Chu Xiu was suddenly shocked. He took a few steps forward, and the fog in front of him became thinner and thinner. In front of Chu Xiu was a big spirit array shining with dazzling light. In the center of the big spirit array, 8 huge bronze pillars stood in a circle. Each bronze pillar was engraved with complex formation patterns, and a chain was separated from the bronze pillar to the center of the spirit array. In the center of the spirit array, there was also a bronze pillar. The only difference was that a black-robed figure was tied to the bronze pillar by an iron chain. Countless gang qi, lightning, and even earth, wind, water, fire, and other forces bombarded his body, but he was like a dead man, motionless, and those forces could not really smash him into pieces. Perhaps because he sensed Chu Xiu's arrival, he raised his head, revealing a chiseled face. He could not be considered young, nor could he be considered old, but his eyes were pitch black and surging with demonic qi. This face was exactly the same as the face of Dugu Weiwei that Chu Xiu had seen in the illusion. This was really the place where Dugu Weiwei was imprisoned. Seeing Chu Xiu coming, Dugu Weiwei revealed a smile on his face. It was an extremely pure smile, and no one could see any emotions. Looking at the existence in front of him, Chu Xiu had a stomach full of questions, but in the end he only said, "You are Dugu Weiwei? Then who am I?" With a smile still on his face, Dugu Weiwei shook his head and said, "I am not Dugu Weiwei, and you are not Dugu Weiwei. You are you and I am me. You, me and him. Only when we are together can we be the only one." Chapter 1189. Looking at Dugu Weiwei in front of him and listening to the words that seemed to have been said to him, Chu Xiu suddenly realized that the Dugu Weiwei he saw was not the same Dugu Weiwei. He had seen many Dugu Weiwos in his illusions. Other than the one in the Devil Sex Inheritance, there were only 2 main Dugu Weiwos. One of them was the Dugu Weiwa in front of him, and the other was the Dugu Weiwa who was in the boundless sea of blood. Now that he thought about it, Chu Xiu found that although they looked exactly the same, their temperament was somewhat different. "You are you and I am me. But who are you, and who am I? I want to know the answer." Chu Xiu took a deep breath and tried to suppress his emotions. Dugu Weiwei smiled and said, "Don't worry. Since you have found this place, of course, I will tell you. Where should I start? Well, you should know the secret technique of 3 pure ones in 3 pure temple. The heaven and earth souls are always outside, but the life soul is alone in the body. The Taoist priests in 3 pure temple do have some skills. This secret technique is very interesting. After I got it, or rather, after Dugu Weiwei got it, he transformed it into a soul-splitting technique. 1 body with 3 souls, 3 incarnations. I am the heaven soul, and you are the earth soul. Hearing Dugu Weiwei, or more accurately, Dugu Weiwei's heaven soul, say this, Chu Xiu could not help but let out a long sigh of relief. He had mixed feelings. In the past, Lu Jiang had told him that his appearance was exactly the same as the incarnation of Dugu Weiwei's earth soul. Now it seemed that this was indeed the case. He was not the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei, but a part of Dugu Weiwei. This feeling made Chu Xiu feel a little awkward and even a little resistant. What about the life soul? Where is the life soul? Most importantly, what are you going to do with me? Did you leave so many arrangements in the lower realm to fuse the three souls of heaven, earth, and fate? Also, what's with the memories of my past life? Tianhun shook his head and said, I know you have many questions. Tell me slowly. Where should I start? Let's start with Dugu Weiwei's arrival in the Daluotian. Although the Daluotian people were deserters from the great ancient calamity, one had to admit that they were still capable. No one was a match for Dugu Weiwei, but they still joined forces and used all the divine abilities of their sex, sharing them with each other. They even used countless trump cards and secret arts to destroy Dugu Weiwei's body. Since you're here, you should know what happened in that battle. The eternal demon pill is not truly indestructible. After a body has been destroyed once, if it is destroyed again, it will not be able to recover in a short period of time. Dugu Weiwei was not confident of winning that battle. Thus, when he took over another body, it was no longer himself. Instead, it was me, the heavenly soul. Speaking to this point, there was a hint of self-mockery on Tianhun's face. I'm a scapegoat and have been sealed here. The Daluotian people are also idiots. They thought that they had won and sealed Dugu Weiwei. In reality, I'm only a part of him. Meanwhile, Dugu Weiwei's true consciousness, which is his life soul, is hiding in the netherworld sky and recovering its power. Since you were able to obtain many arrangements left behind by Dugu Weiwei in the lower realm, you must have seen him. What about me? Why was I split up as an earth soul? Tianhun said, You're different from me. To be precise, you're more important than me. I'm just a scapegoat, while you're the key to Dugu Weiwei's plan. Plan? Plan. A plan to successfully find the longevity heaven. Tianhun took a deep breath and said, There are 5 heaven realms in this world. In ancient times, the place where the ancient cultivators lived was called the upper realm. There's also the lower realm, which overlaps with the upper realm. The great ancient calamity only destroyed the upper realm. Some damaged ruins merged with the lower realm, and in the end, it became the lower realm. The netherworld sky, where Dugu Weiwei's life soul is filled with evil ghosts. It's the place where the yin energy in the world gathers. Apart from him, even Ning Xuanji, the old Taoist priest, cannot enter. The rest is the Daluotian you saw. As for the other one, it's the legendary longevity heaven. Immortality, indestructibility, impermanence, destruction, emptiness, transcending the world. It's the real transcendence. Dugu Weiwei had already reached the peak of the 9th level of martial immortal. In fact, he could not even be considered a martial immortal. Instead, he was in existence above the entire martial immortal realm. However, in order to truly transcend, to truly become undying and indestructible, he must enter the path of longevity. In order to enter the celestial longevity plane, one must gather all 3 essences. The origin is the most basic rule of power in the whole world. It's divided into yin and yang origins. The extreme yin origin is the demonic Tao origin. Therefore, to enter the longevity heaven, he must gather 3 demonic Tao origins or 3 extreme yang origins. Among them, he had already obtained the origin of diabolism of absolute heaven during the fierce battle. If his true body's life spirit headed to the Yellow Springs heaven, he would be able to seize the origin of diabolism of Yellow Springs heaven as well. Therefore, he was only left with the origin of diabolism of the lower realm that he had yet to obtain. Dugu Weiwei dominated the martial world in the lower realm, but he has never found the demonic Tao origin that belongs to the mortal world. This is karma and also fate. However, after he deduced the heaven's sun gazing at air to the peak, he saw a glimmer of possibility. In 500 years, the demonic Tao origin will appear in the lower realm. Only then can he obtain it. I, a heavenly soul, am imprisoned here. It's difficult to enter the netherworld sky, and it's even more difficult to leave. At least for now, he can't leave. Therefore, the only person who can obtain the demonic Tao origin in the mortal world is you. He threw you, an earthly soul, into the spiritual reincarnation. You only woke up 500 years later. What Tianhun had said was a huge blow to Chu Xiu. After a long while, he had digested all this information and asked, "Does that mean that my memories from my previous life are fake?" Heavenly Soul shook his head and said, "I don't know what you experienced in your previous life, but those are not fake. This world is divided into 5 worlds. Under the reincarnation of time and space, what you experienced is, of course, real, but a part of it is fake. When you wake up, do you think that you can see the future? But how do you know that what you see in the future is real? Those things are just the karma of the future that Dugu Weiwei deduced using the heaven's sun gazing at air technique. After it is engraved in the depths of your soul, it appears. Therefore, when your abilities become stronger and you change more karma, those things will truly disappear." Chu Xiu closed his eyes. He understood. He finally understood. His memories had indeed been tampered with. The so-called future was actually just the karma that the heaven's sun gazing at air technique had deduced. At that moment, Chu Xiu's emotions were extremely complicated. Previously, he had always thought that he was the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. In the end, only now did he know that his true identity was not even as good as a reincarnation. At the very least, the reincarnation would be him, but now he was not even a person. He was just a clone of Dugu Weiwei. This situation made Chu Xiu somewhat resistant and somewhat unacceptable. At that moment, Tianhun suddenly said, "Okay, I've said everything that needs to be said. Now, it's time to talk about our own matters. To be precise, it's about the two of us." "What matters?" Tianhun laughed coldly and said, "I can feel that ever since you entered the soul cloud realm, you've been resisting. You've been carefully exploring. Therefore, I only have one question for you now. Do you want to be Dugu Weiwei or Chu Xiu?" "Of course it's Chu Xiu." Chu Xiu said in a low voice. "The demon master who dominated the world 500 years ago was not me. The one who stands at the peak of the pugilistic world 500 years later is me, Chu Xiu." Tianhun suddenly laughed out loud and said, "As expected of an earthly soul. You and I were once one entity. Our thoughts are exactly the same. There's one thing I haven't told you. Dugu Weiwei's plan was perfect. I, a heavenly soul, became his scapegoat and was imprisoned in the Dalu Ocean. The real soul seized the origin of the netherworld demonic path, accumulated power, and recuperated. As an earthly soul, you Chu Xiu waited for 500 years in the samsara. When you woke up, you cultivated to the peak and seized the origin of the heavenly demonic path for him. Then the 3 souls merged into one and opened the everlasting heaven. In the end, you became immortal and completely detached. But nothing in this world is perfect. Naturally, plans are the same. There's a loophole in Dugu Weiwei's plan." "What loophole?" "You and I are the loophole." Tianhun laughed coldly and said, "The only thing that Dugu Weiwei didn't take into account was time. Time can change many things. The wonders of creation are beyond his imagination. 500 years is too long. It's so long that I, a heavenly soul, and you, an earthly soul, have developed your own consciousness. This shouldn't have happened. The 3 souls merged into one, and the soul-splitting technique was just splitting the soul and not independent. However, ever since Dugu Weiwei entered the netherworld heaven 500 years ago, he could no longer control me, a heavenly soul, because of the separation between worlds. Thus, I don't know when it happened. I don't know if it happened 300 or 200 years ago, but I developed my own consciousness. I have all the memories of Dugu Weiwei before he entered the netherworld heaven, but I know that I'm not Dugu Weiwei. And you Chu Xiu. After you were split, although I don't know what you experienced, I'm sure that you weren't controlled by Dugu Weiwei. Otherwise, you wouldn't have come here. Heavenly souls and earthly souls can only be devoured. There's no need for us to meet. Previously, I tried to use my mental power to sense you, but it was a world away, and there was only a vague mark. Now that you're in front of me, I can finally confirm this. When he said this, the heavenly soul's expression gradually became distorted. I was created by Dugu Weiwei, but I replaced him and was trapped here for 500 years. I suffered 500 years of loneliness. I've already repaid this karma. I'm not Dugu Weiwei, nor am I a heavenly soul. I'm the great demon Dugu, who was sealed by the Daluotian experts for 500 years. Chapter 1190. The voice of heavenly soul, or rather the great demon Dugu, resounded in Chu Xiu's mind, causing his thoughts to run wild. He was Chu Xiu. He had not been Dugu Weiwei in the past, and he would not be Dugu Weiwei in the future either. However, unlike heavenly soul, who had thoughts of repaying the karma, Chu Xiu was much more heartless. He did not care who had created his existence. He was Chu Xiu, he was himself. There was no memory of Dugu Weiwei in his mind. After heavenly soul had vented his emotions, Chu Xiu asked in a low voice, "So, what do you plan to do now? You've known all this for 500 years, but I only found out the truth now. You should have a plan, right?" Tianhun squinted his eyes and said, "Of course there is. You and I are both split from Dugu Weiwei. In a certain sense, although we have already developed our own consciousness and have our own personalities, we are still very similar in some aspects. I like to plan before taking action. I believe you are the same, right?" Chu Xiu nodded. In fact, heavenly soul's expression was exactly the same as when he was about to plot against someone. However, after interacting with him for such a short period of time, Chu Xiu could more or less see what kind of personality heavenly soul had. If Chu Xiu's personality was gloomy and calm, and he was rarely dominated by his own strange emotions, heavenly soul was wild and domineering. He had a strong personality and could not control his own emotions. He had been trapped for 500 years, but he was still agitated at the mention of this matter. On the other hand, although Chu Xiu had just learned the truth and was still agitated, he was able to control his emotions. At the very least, he could not let his emotions show on a large scale. What kind of person was Dugu Weiwei's real body, which was his life soul? Chu Xiu could not help but think of the figure sitting on the white bone throne and stepping on the countless evil spirits and ghosts in the sea of blood. Powerful. Extremely powerful. The only word that Chu Xiu could think of was pitiful. At this moment, Tianhun said in a low voice, "The three souls have separated. To be more precise, in Dugu Weiwei's eyes, you and I should be traitors. Therefore, when he breaks free from the netherworld heaven, he will definitely come to us for fusion. Of course, to him, it's fusion, but to us, it's devouring. He will retain all of our memories, but his own consciousness will be completely erased. So before he comes, we must grow strong enough to fight against him." "That's right. Did you obtain the source of the devil path in the lower realms?" Chu Xiu had a faint guess in his heart, but he still shook his head and said, "No, if you didn't tell me, I wouldn't even know about the existence of an origin." Tianhun nodded and said, "That's good too. As long as we don't get our hands on the demonic Tao source, Dugu Weiwei won't touch you for now." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "So now, you're going to ask me to let you go?" Tianhun suddenly laughed and said, "As I said, although you and I now have our own consciousnesses and are two different people, you and I are, after all, existences of the same origin. In some aspects, we are still very consistent. I can feel that you are still wary of me, but it doesn't matter, it's normal. If you didn't even have this vigilance, even if the arrangements that Dugu Weiwei left for you allowed your strength to improve by leaps and bounds, you wouldn't have been able to live until now, let alone come to the Daluotian continent. Now, you don't have to help me with anything, and you can't help me. Do you see those bronze pillars around me? They were created by the combined power of 9 top sects: High Heaven Sect, Royal Sky Pavilion, Mysterious Heaven Territory, 3 Pure Temple, Heavenly Luo Treasure Temple, Brahma Religion, and Sword Sect. Moreover, 500 years ago, almost all the sects took out their trump cards to support the operation of the Spirit Array. Even after 500 years, the Spirit Array has not weakened in the slightest and is still in its peak state. The power stored can even last for another 1,000 years. With your current strength, you can't break the spirit array at all, nor can you save me. Even if a martial immortal below the 7th heavenly layer came, it would be useless. Hearing Tianhuan's words, Chu Xiu couldn't help but be speechless. Exactly how many people had Dugu Weiwa killed 500 years ago to actually cause the martial artists of the exalted heaven to fear him to such an extent, practically wishing for nothing more than to use the power of the entire exalted heaven to seal him? In fact, Dugu Weiwei's choice back then was not wrong. If he hadn't chosen to retreat and use Tianhun as bait to attract the Daluotian continent's attention, the Daluotian continent might have used the power of an entire world to deal with him. Dugu Weiwei was an existence that surpassed the 9th level of martial immortal, but he was not a true god. He was unable to fight against an entire world with his own strength. Tianhun continued, "So, you don't have to worry about me now. If you and I don't want to be devoured by Dugu Weiwei, the key lies with you. Among the heavenly, and earthly souls, the life soul where Dugu Weiwei's consciousness was located was definitely the strongest. 500 years had passed. He had most likely recovered his body and obtained the source demon of the Yellow Springs Heaven. He had also borrowed the power of an entire world in the Yellow Springs Heaven to cultivate. His strength had even surpassed his state when he fought against the Daluotian continent's experts 500 years ago. Without you and me, the heavenly soul and the earthly soul, Dugu Weiwa would only lose a soul-splitting technique. In addition, his body would not be complete, so it would affect his transcendence. Other than that, his strength would not be affected at all. As for me, you've seen it for yourself. I'm a cripple after being sealed here. Furthermore, even if I were to leave, recover my body, and cultivate to my peak again, I would at most be at the level of Dugu Weiwei 500 years ago. I would still be defeated by him. But you, earthly soul Chu Xiu, you're different. In the past, Dugu Weiwei could not find the source demon of the Yellow Springs Heaven in the lower realms. He believed that it was because of karma that he could not obtain the source demon of the Yellow Springs Heaven. Thus, he sent your spirit into the reincarnation of time and space to wash away the mark that belonged to Dugu Weiwei on your body. He let you grow and find the source demon of the Yellow Springs Heaven. In this way, you were the one who was the least affected by Dugu Weiwei. Compared to me, you are a completely new existence, and you have a more limitless future. The heavenly soul gazed at Chu Xiu and said, "What I have more than you are Dugu Weiwei's memories. These memories are enough for me to help you grow faster and smoothly step through those bottlenecks. As for the rest, you'll have to rely on yourself. Once you've grown to the point where you can rival Dugu Weiwa and walk a completely different path from him, you'll let me out. Then you and I will kill Dugu Weiwa together. Only when he is dead can you and I be truly independent. You don't have to worry about being devoured at any time." Chu Xiu nodded. The heavenly soul really knew him very well. He really could not let the heavenly soul out now. Chu Xiu never trusted anyone. He liked to put everything under his control. Now he felt that he could not control the heavenly soul, so he was not willing to let him out. If he waited until he grew to the point where he could control everything in the future, he would let the heavenly soul out. "But how can I contact you? I belong to another force in the Daluotian, not the High Heaven sect. Therefore, I can only enter the spiritual cloud realm once. Otherwise, unless I destroy the High Heaven sect directly, I will have almost no chance to enter again." The heavenly soul said, "It's simple. Although this spirit array completely seals my physical strength and even my Yuan spirit has certain restrictions, over the years, my Yuan spirit has actually grown a little, so I can contact the outside world through a secret method." With that, the golden light of the Yuan spirit directly transformed into a set of seals behind Tianhuan's head. "Remember these seals. You need to find me for some time. Make the seals with the purest power of the Yuan spirit, and I will be able to sense it. But you have to pay attention to the time. This kind of seal that communicates with the Yuan spirit consumes a lot of the power of the Yuan spirit." After memorizing this set of seals, Chu Xiu said, "I can stay in the spiritual cloud realm for 7 days because I am now stuck in a bottleneck. I have actually already stepped into the mysterious heaven and earth realm, But I still can't condense a domain, so I can't really step into the mysterious heaven and earth realm perfectly. Since the heavenly soul had said that the two sides were cooperating, Chu Xiu did not need to be polite with him. The heavenly soul had all the memories of Dugu Weiwei 500 years ago, so his attainments in martial arts must be far superior to Chu Xiu's. Therefore, this problem that had troubled Chu Xiu for a long time might not be difficult for the heavenly soul. This is simple. First, tell me about your own martial arts. Although my Yuan spirit can vaguely sense many things in your body, I can't sense the specific martial arts and so on. After Chu Xiu had roughly explained his own martial arts to the heavenly soul thought for a while and said, "It seems that you have used many of the arrangements left by Dugu Weiwei in the mortal world, but you still walked a different path. What is a domain? A domain is a world that you build after you control the rules. Some people have an extreme understanding of fire, so their domain is fire. Some people have an extreme understanding of ice, so their domain is ice. But you are different. You don't have to consider those ordinary domains. You have learned a variety of things, but when all kinds of martial arts are condensed to the extreme, it is nothing more than fighting and killing. Don't think about which power to choose for yourself. You are the most respected power in every power. Within the domain, you are the only one in the world. This is the domain that you should control." As the heavenly soul's voice fell, his Yuan spirit turned into a golden light and displayed various changes of rules in midair. This most direct observation was more useful than any guidance or words. It was no wonder that the heavenly soul said that he could help Chu Xiu overcome these bottlenecks. Chu Xiu sat cross-legged on the ground, and the various powers in his body began to merge. The rich spiritual energy of the heaven and earth in the spiritual sky realm surged into Chu Xiu's body frantically, causing his power and aura to soar instantly. Chapter 1191. Outside the spirit cloud realm, Qin Baiyuan did not leave but stood guard there. Although he allowed Chu Xiu to enter the spirit cloud realm, he could not help but think of what his master had told him in the past about the terrifying existence that was sealed in the spirit cloud realm. If it was his own disciple, Qin Baiyuan would be more at ease, but he was also afraid that Chu Xiu could not help but enter to find out what was going on. Although Chu Xiu could not destroy the spirit formation with his strength, it was better to be safe than sorry. At this moment, a powerful fluctuation of power came from the spirit cloud realm. As the previous sect master, Qin Baiyuan had taught countless disciples. He could almost instantly tell that this was the fluctuation of condensing a domain and officially stepping into the profound understanding realm. At this moment, Qin Baiyuan suddenly felt uncomfortable, as if he had eaten a fly. It was not surprising that Chu Xiu had broken through to the profound understanding realm. The cultivation that Chu Xiu had shown before was already at the peak of the true fire spirit refinement realm. In terms of strength, he had even surpassed some existences in the profound understanding realm. What made Qin Baiyuan worried was that Chu Xiu had just beaten up a disciple of High Heaven sect, and in the end he had used their blessed cave of High Heaven sect to step into the profound understanding realm. This was not a good feeling. At this time, in the spirit cloud realm, the power around Chu Xiu began to shrink and expand. A layer of misty domain spread from his body, 10 feet, 10 feet, and finally to 1,000 feet. In that misty domain, the space rules were distorted, and all existences were being strangled. The world was in chaos, and yin and yang were reversed. Only Chu Xiu was the only true god in the domain. Tianhun looked at Chu Xiu with a smile and said, "Not bad, very good. I knew that even if all your memories have been erased, you are still the Earth Soul incarnation of Dugu Weiwei. This speed of comprehension is normal." Chu Xiu let out a long sigh and said, "The domain that Dugu Weiwei condensed in the past, is it the same as mine?" Tianhun shook his head. "It's not the same. What Dugu Weiwei condensed is the myriad demon domain. You should have been to the primitive demon cave before. When Dugu Weiwei opens his domain, within that domain is the primitive demon cave, but it is the primitive demon cave that belongs to Dugu Weiwei." Chu Xiu was shocked when he heard Tianhuan's words. The environment of the primitive demon cave could actually be recreated using human strength. Just how terrifying was Dugu Weiwei's domain? But you don't have to worry. The path you're taking is already different from the one Dugu Weiwei arranged for you to take. Although the domain you've condensed now is definitely not comparable to Dugu Weiwei's domain now, no one knows how far it will grow in the future. Chu Xiu nodded. But what should his domain be called? Chu Xiu's domain could be said to be different from the domains condensed by all the heaven and earth mysterious realm martial artists. It did not contain any attributes. Could it be called the unique and righteous domain? Although the more words it had, the more difficult it was to pronounce. After thinking about it, Chu Xiu decided to call it the divine domain. He was the true god that controlled everything in the domain, so it was called the divine domain. That's right. How much do you know about the heavenly gates? Chu Xiu suddenly asked. Tianhun immediately reacted. Do you have a grudge against the heavenly gates? Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and nodded. Of course I do. I have a huge grudge. The current heavenly gates master almost killed me. Of course, without him, I would not have been able to come to the Daluocean. Tianhun shook his head slightly. This group of watchdogs is really courting death. Watchdogs? Tianhun said, the heavenly gates used to be the gatekeepers, but now, they are just watchdogs. Furthermore, they are the kind of watchdogs that have betrayed their masters. The origin of the heavenly gates was actually very simple. In the past, when people from the lower realm came to the Daluocean, they definitely had to open a door, and that door was the heavenly gates. The Daluocean people did not want to face the horror of the great ancient calamity. After coming to the Daluocean, they were also worried that the power of the great ancient calamity would spread to the Daluocean. Therefore, they built a formation in the Daluocean and the heavenly gates at the same time to seal the passage. They also set up an unimaginable seal in the heavenly gates. The first generation of guardians of the heavenly gates were gatekeepers with the will to die. Their families, masters, and disciples had all been arranged by the Daluocean, while they guarded the heavenly gates in the lower realm with the determination to die 10 times. However, after that, although the great ancient calamity was terrifying, there was still a chance of survival. In particular, after the mortal world and the mortal world merged, a new world was created and the great ancient calamity dissipated. In the past few generations, the gatekeepers of the heavenly gates were very normal. They monitored the lower realm to prevent the great ancient calamity from happening again. Every once in a while, they would send some news through this method. However, after a few generations, the subsequent gatekeepers of the heavenly gates had nothing to do with the previous generations. Naturally, they had some strange ideas. At this point, Tianhun laughed coldly and said, since ancient times, everything has a fixed number. Only the human heart is immeasurable. The people from the celestial of absolute heaven had missed out on this point. The subsequent generations of celestial gate guardians were no longer willing to simply be gatekeepers. Thus, they closed the passageway connecting to the higher realm and completely sealed off the formation. However, they used the grotto heavens and blessed lands left behind by the celestial gate in the past to cultivate. Furthermore, because the heavenly gates was a place that connected the upper and lower realms, the vitality of the heaven and earth was abnormally rich and thick. It was a genuine treasure land. From then on, there were no gatekeepers of the heavenly gates. There were only the master of the heavenly gates and the 9 divine generals. Chu Xiu said, so the people of the heavenly gates collected the heavenly keys because they didn't want others to discover their secret. Or rather, they didn't want people from the lower realm to come to the Daluocean and let the Daluocean know about the situation in the heavenly gates? Tianhun nodded and said, that's more or less what they meant. The heavenly gates unilaterally blocked the formation and cut off the source of news. Thus, the Daluocean people still don't know about the situation in the heavenly gates. They thought that something had happened to the gatekeepers that they had left behind. However, those fellows were courting death. 500 years ago, they provoked Dugu Weiwei and were almost slaughtered. Now they have come to provoke you. This is really fate. Chu Xiu frowned and said, then why didn't Dugu Weiwei destroy the heavenly gates 500 years ago? Why did he give them a chance to survive? This was what Chu Xiu was most confused about. Dugu Weiwei was not a soft-hearted person. Tianhun said, "It's very simple. It's because he wanted to stay in the heavenly gates and continue to be a watchdog. Although the heavenly gates are watchdogs that have betrayed their master, their existence is very necessary. The Daluotian and the heavenly gates seals were set up by the experts from the lower realm. These seals can last for 1,000 or even thousands of years, but they can't be preserved forever. Thus, for their own sake, the heavenly gates has to carefully strengthen these seals at all times. Once the heavenly gates are destroyed, as time passes, the seals will loosen, and the Daluotian will be reconnected with the lower realm. This will allow the Daluotian vitality of the heaven and earth to flow into the lower realm. Isn't this a good thing? At the very least, it's a good thing for the lower realm." Tianhun laughed coldly and said, "Perhaps it's a good thing for the lower realm in the beginning. However, after a period of time, when the Daluotian vitality of the heaven and earth stabilizes the passageway, the Daluotian and the lower realm will be completely connected. When that time comes, the Daluotian warriors will be able to descend, and the warriors from the lower realm will be able to ascend to the Daluotian." It sounds good, but do you think that both parties will get along peacefully? At that time, Dugu Weiwei already knew about the Daluotian's existence. However, he had just pacified the martial world and was the sole ruler in the lower realm. He could go to the Daluotian, but how could he tolerate the Daluotian warriors coming to the lower realm? Thus, he left a chance for the heavenly gates and allowed them to continue to be watchdogs. Chu Xiu nodded his head in understanding. If that was the case, everything made sense. At that moment, Tianhuan's expression was solemn as he said, "You have a grudge against the heavenly gates and want to destroy them. That's possible. They are just a group of watchdogs, and you can kill them whenever you want. However, before you have absolute power, it's best that you don't touch the heavenly gates." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Because the Daluotian is connected to the lower realm? Don't worry, before I make full use of the Daluotian's power, I won't do such a thing." Although Chu Xiu held a grudge and really wanted to destroy the heavenly gates, he did not have the power to destroy the heavenly gates. Even if he did, he would not do so for the time being. Now that he controlled a passageway that was connected to the Daluotian, if the seal on the heavenly gates loosened and the Daluotian vitality of the heaven and earth flowed into the lower realm, or even connected to the two realms, what advantage would Chu Xiu have? Thus, he had to turn these advantages into power before he could consider the problem of touching the heavenly gates. Tianhun shook his head and said, "That's not the reason. It's because there's a source in the heavenly gates, a source of extreme yang." Dugu Weiwei only found out about this after he reached the Daluotian. A formation that could seal two worlds was not something that ordinary formations could do. At the core of the formation in the heavenly gates, there was a source of extreme yang that belonged to the mortal realm. If Dugu Weiwei had known about this, he would definitely have destroyed the heavenly gates. Even if it meant damaging the formation and connecting the two realms, he had to obtain that source. However, it was a pity that he did not have the chance in the end. This was something that Dugu Weiwei could not do, but you have the chance to do so. The source of extreme yang is right in the middle of the passageway. Half of it is connected to the formation on the Daluotian side, while the other half is connected to the formation on the lower realm. Thus, if you can cultivate to the point where you can easily destroy the heavenly gates in the future, you must find a suitable opportunity and make sure that there are no experts guarding the Daluotian sealed area, which is the Daluotian Divine Palace. Then, you can destroy the heavenly gates in one fell swoop and obtain the source of extreme yang. Remember, grudges are secondary. The source of extreme yang is the most precious. Chapter 1192. Tianhun mentioned the origin several times, and his face became more serious, which showed the importance of the origin. 3 strands of essence could give one the qualifications to enter the longevity sky. What if one possessed more? Chu Xiu did not ask about this, but kept it in mind. All the doubts in Chu Xiu's mind had been answered by Tianhun, but he did not feel relieved. Instead, he felt that he had been shackled by a heavier layer of shackles. Before, Chu Xiu had always felt that he had a certain relationship with Dugu Weiwei, but he did not know what it was. Now that Chu Xiu knew about it, he felt even more pressured. For Dugu Weiwei, Tianhun and Chu Xiu were just doppelgangers that he had created, and they had their own tasks. However, these two doppelgangers had not completed their tasks, and they had even developed their own consciousness. Of course, he could not tolerate this. It was normal to take back one's own things. But for Chu Xiu and Tianhun, this was exactly what they could not tolerate. Tianhun had at least the memory of Dugu Weiwei 500 years ago, but Chu Xiu had nothing. Now someone told him that he was actually just a part of someone else, and that he was going to swallow him to return to his perfect state. Of course, Chu Xiu would not agree. No one knew when Dugu Weiwei, who was hiding in the netherworld heaven, would be able to break free from the shackles of the netherworld heaven. At that time, Dugu Weiwei would be even more terrifying than Dugu Weiwei, who had fought against the entire Daluotian 500 years ago. There was not much time left for Chu Xiu. In the remaining time, Tianhun seized the time to instill all the martial arts that Chu Xiu could accept into his mind, so that he could avoid many bottlenecks in the mysterious heaven and earth realm. 7 days later, the spiritual cloud realm opened again. Lu Sanjin and the others were already waiting for Chu Xiu outside the spiritual cloud realm. Seeing Chu Xiu coming out with the momentum of the mysterious heaven and earth realm, Lu Sanjin's eyes widened. "Brother Chu, have you stepped into the mysterious heaven and earth realm?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Why? Is it strange?" Lu Sanjin shook his head with a strange look. "No, of course not." Thinking of Chu Xiu's strength, it was not strange that he had stepped into the mysterious heaven and earth realm. However, Chu Xiu already had such battle prowess at the true fire spirit refinement realm. Now that he had reached the heaven and earth profound understanding realm, how terrifying would he be? Standing with Chu Xiu, even Lu Jianghu, he felt a little frustrated at this time. Qin Baiyuan said lightly, "If you want to chat, go out first. My high heaven sect will not keep you any longer." Lu Jianghu curled his lips. Qin Baiyuan was really stingy. It was obvious that he felt it was unfair that Brother Chu had stepped into the mysterious heaven and earth realm. After the group left the High Heaven sect, Chu Xiu asked, "Did the people of Cold River City come to trouble you while I was cultivating in the spiritual cloud realm?" Lu Sanjin shook his head. "No, they didn't dare to do anything in the High Heaven sect." Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Brother Lu, you should tell the pavilion master to make more preparations when you go back. When Qi Wuhan was fighting you, he dared to kill you even in front of the High Heaven sect. It is conceivable that there is no room for reconciliation between the Imperial Sky Pavilion and the Cold River City. In fact, Chu Xiu didn't care if the Imperial Sky Pavilion was destroyed. However, he didn't have any foundation in the Daluotian. The foundation he had accumulated in the southern barbaric land was built with the help of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. If the Imperial Sky Pavilion was destroyed, Chu Xiu's side would be extremely obvious. Therefore, the Imperial Sky Pavilion couldn't be destroyed, at least not for now. After returning to Jianghu County, Chu Xiu felt a greater sense of urgency to improve his strength. He looked for Mei Qinglian and asked, "How are the cultivators of our holy church doing in the Daluotian recently?" Mei Qinglian clicked her tongue and sighed. "They've improved by leaps and bounds. Their cultivation speed is more than 10 times faster than in the lower realm. Not only them, but even the few of us are also accumulating our strength at a rapid pace." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "That's good. In the remaining time, try to arrange as many disciples of the Holy Church to enter the Daluotian to cultivate." Mei Qinglian was taken aback. "But won't there be a risk of exposure?" She still remembered that Chu Xiu had told her to let people enter the Daluotian in batches to cultivate, and that the elites would be given priority. She had to be careful. Why did Chu Xiu change his mind now? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "It's urgent. Time doesn't wait for me." Chu Xiu's words made Mei Qinglian even more puzzled. The Kunlun devil cult in the lower realm might not dominate the world, but their strength had definitely reached the point where no one dared to provoke them. "Time doesn't wait for me at this time?" Could it be that Chu Xiu still wanted to dominate the whole Deluocean? Mei Qinglian still wanted to ask something, but Chu Xiu said directly, "You can arrange the rest as you see fit. I'm going to cultivate in seclusion for a period of time. Don't call me if there's nothing too important. If there's something important, go to Elder Wei to make a decision. If Elder Wei can't handle it, then come to me." After giving these instructions, Chu Xiu immediately began to cultivate in seclusion, which made Mei Qinglian confused. It seemed that after Chu Xiu went to Lingxiao City, he became very anxious, as if some threat was coming. However, when Mei Qinglian asked Lu Jianghe and Lu Fengxian about it, nothing happened. On the contrary, their trip went very smoothly. They defeated the people of Cold River City in a martial arts gambling fight, and Chu Xiu also took this opportunity to step into the heaven and earth profound opening realm. Mei Qinglian was a little confused, but she simply stopped thinking about it and sent people to arrange these messy things. Chu Xiu could go into seclusion and leave everything to others, but she couldn't just ignore it. Just as Chu Xiu was quietly cultivating, a guest came to High Heaven Sect to look for Jianghu Immortal Mountain. It was a strange monk wearing a golden monk robe, with deep-set eyebrows and a high nose bridge. He did not look like someone from the Central Plains, but he was very handsome. The lines on his face seemed to have been chiseled by a knife, giving him a very masculine feeling. He also wore a string of huge Buddha beads around his neck, each of which was the size of a fist and exuded a scorching golden light. After a while, Jianghu Immortal Mountain walked into the reception hall and laughed. "It turns out to be Brother Xinjiao. Your Sanskrit religion rarely leaves the Western Territory. How come you have time to visit me?" The monk in front of him was Xinjiao, the palace master of Sun God Temple of Sanskrit religion, Vishnu Temple. Because Jianghu Immortal Mountain had traveled to the Western Territory before, he also formally visited the major sects of the Western Territory, Sanskrit religion and Heavenly Luo Treasure Temple. But compared with the rigid monks of Heavenly Luo Treasure Temple, he got along better with the people of Sanskrit religion, so he also made many friends from Sanskrit religion. Moriha, the palace master of Illusion Celestial Palace who died at the hands of Chu Xiu before, was also one of his good friends. Exin Jalua said helplessly, "I have said many times, my surname is not Exin." Jianghu Immortal Mountain nodded indifferently and said, "I am used to it. What matter does Brother Exin have with me? I heard you are preparing to take over the position of Lord of Vishnu Temple?" Exin Jalua had already given up on correcting Jianghu Immortal Mountain. But when he heard that, he still had a proud expression on his face and said, "More or less. But right now, I have yet to step into the realm of Martial Immortal. After I officially step into the realm of Martial Immortal, the old palace master is preparing to abdicate and pass the position of Lord of Vishnu Temple to me." Jianghu Immortal Mountain laughed loudly and said, "That is truly worthy of celebration. Brother Exine, you are well prepared. Making a breakthrough to the realm of Martial Immortal is only a matter of time. Moreover, under your leadership, Sun God Temple has become the largest temple in Vishnu Temple. Almost no one will fight you for the position of the next lord. Of course, no one will dare to fight you for it. So, right now, you can just calmly wait to take over the position of lord." Exin Jalua shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "Precisely because I am preparing to take over the position of lord, troublesome matters have come one after another. The matters that originally did not belong to my Sun God Temple have all fallen on my head. Brother Jianghu, I will not hide it from you. This time, I have come to the Eastern Territory to find a person." "Who are you looking for?" "The palace master of the Illusion Heavenly Palace, Moriha." The palace masters of the Sanskrit religion took turns to look for Mahakala Temple. Seeing that it was already time for Moriha to take over, but he had not returned to the Sanskrit religion, the people of the Sanskrit religion began to contact Moriha. As a result, when they used a secret method to contact Moriha, they found that they could not get in touch with him. Only then did they feel that the situation was not good. So, they sent Exin Jalua, who was also a member of Vishnu Temple and was preparing to take over the position of Lord of Temple, to look for Moriha. Jianghu Immortal Mountain patted his head and said, "Moriha, I met him some time ago when my High Heaven sect and Royal Heaven Pavilion had a martial exhibition. I even chatted with him for a while. Exangelua hurriedly asked, "What happened after that? Where did Moriha go after that?" Linghu Immortal Mountain spread his hands and said, "I don't know. He is a mysterious person. I asked him why he came to the Eastern Territory, but he did not tell me. In any case, he disappeared later." Exangelua frowned. If even a local snake like Linghu Immortal Mountain did not know about this, it would be difficult. At this time, Linghu Immortal Mountain said, "You can't find Moriha? No matter what, he is still an expert of the heaven and earth profound understanding realm. Furthermore, with his powerful illusory technique, if he wants to escape, even I don't have the confidence to kill him. Don't worry, he should be fine." Speaking of which, I've seen someone use Moriha's illusion before. Could this guy be teaching his disciple in my East region? If you see him, you should warn him that if your Sanskrit religion comes to the Eastern Territory to preach, it will be a big taboo. If he really causes trouble, don't blame me for not showing mercy. What? Someone used Moriha's illusion technique? Who was it? Gu Zun's successor, Royal Heaven Pavilion's honored guest, Jianghu County's county governor, Chu Xiu. Chapter 1193. After coming out of High Heaven sect, Exangelua's originally masculine face became gloomy at this time. He was certain that there was definitely something wrong with Chu Xiu. Linghu Xianshan said that Chu Xiu might have learned Moriha's illusion technique from Moriha, but this was absolutely impossible. The secret arts of Sanskrit religion could never be passed on to outsiders, and Moriha's illusion technique was extremely unique to him. Even the other disciples of illusionary Heavenly King Palace had not learned it. In Moriha's words, his core illusion technique would only be passed on to disciples he thought were qualified to be his inheritor. And an outsider, no matter how talented they were, could never learn Moriha's illusion technique. Although Linghu Xianshan was not sure that the illusion technique Chu Xiu used belonged to Moriha, according to him, it was 80% similar. But forget 80%, even if it was only half, Exangelua would still come to check it out. As for the other party's identity as Imperial Heaven Pavilion's county governor, Exangelua had no scruples. Although they were both top Daluotian sects, the gap in strength between the two sides was not small. With the strength of Sanskrit religion, any one of its temples could destroy Imperial Heaven Pavilion. Even when Imperial Heaven Pavilion was at its peak, it did not dare to challenge Sanskrit religion. At night, Chu Xiu's entire body was shrouded by a layer of hazy mist in the secret room of Jianghu County. His aura carried a strange sense of rhythm as he breathed in and out. His strength and foundation were growing rapidly. Tianhun had all the memories of Dugu Weiwei, so naturally, he also had his martial Dao insights. Although these martial Dao insights were only from 500 years ago, the Dugu Weiwei of that time was already strong enough. In addition, many of Chu Xiu's secret arts were related to Dugu Weiwei, so some of the cultivation methods given to him by Tianhun Temple could be perfectly inherited by Chu Xiu. However, Tianhun had also warned Chu Xiu that he could use the techniques that belonged to Dugu Weiwei. He could even use them without worry, but he could not use all of them. This was because the path he wanted to take had to be different from Dugu Weiwei. Only then could he possibly surpass Dugu Weiwei. If not, if Chu Xiu walked down the same path as Dugu Weiwei, even if he cultivated to the level of Dugu Weiwei 500 years ago and released his heavenly soul, he would only be an antique from 500 years ago. What they had to face was Dugu Weiwei, who had rested and built up his strength in the netherworld heaven for 500 years. He had obtained the origin of the netherworld heaven devil path, and no one knew how much his martial arts had evolved. At that time, if he took the same path as Dugu Weiwei, he and Tianhun would definitely lose. Just as Chu Xiu was focusing all his energy on cultivation, the periphery of the governor's mansion suddenly shone with a golden light. The light of the array flowed, and the extreme power of the array erupted. Chu Xiu's eyes suddenly opened. Someone had broken into the governor's mansion. Furthermore, they had already broken into the interior. Previously, the governor's mansion had an array. However, it was only a governor's mansion, so naturally, it would not have a very good array. Thus, Chu Xiu had asked Master Yuanji to set up an array that had been passed down from the sky-weeping demon venerate in the innermost area of the governor's mansion when he had some free time. At that moment, as long as this array had a reaction, it meant that the other party had silently broken through several arrays. It was only when they encountered the array that had been passed down from the sky-weeping demon venerate that the other party was completely stopped. Chu Xiu's figure moved, and he broke through the door of the seclusion room and appeared outside the governor's mansion. At that moment, on the east side of the governor's mansion, Zingaluo stood in midair. When he saw the array that had lit up before him, he revealed a shocked expression. One had to know that with his strength, a mere county governor manor's array formation was nothing to him at all. Who would have thought there would be such a sensitive array within the governor's mansion? It had already been activated just as he was about to break the array. Chu Xiu looked at the strange monk before him and immediately frowned. Now that he had stepped into the profound understanding of heaven and earth realm, it was only natural that he could sense the monk's strength. Powerful, very powerful. Chu Xiu had only felt such power from a cultivator of the same level as him, Yi Xiaonan. Yi Xiaonan was likely only a step away from becoming a martial immortal. Who are you? How dare you barge into the Imperial Sky Pavilion's Kangwu County's governor's mansion? Zingaluo did not answer Chu Xiu. Instead, he said coldly, "Where is Moriha?" Chu Xiu's expression did not change, but his heart clenched. Zingaluo was here for Moriha. Actually, Chu Xiu had already expected this day. Moriha was an expert of the profound understanding of heaven and earth realm, as well as the palace lord of the illusionary heavenly palace. It was impossible for the Sanskrit sect to not react to his disappearance. It was already too late for the Sanskrit sect to only come now. Chu Xiu's expression did not change in the slightest. He merely snorted coldly and said, "What Moriha? I don't know who he is. Who exactly are you?" Back then, only Su Fengshan and a few others had seen Chu Xiu kill Moriha. Although they were not Chu Xiu's trusted subordinates, they did not dare to challenge Chu Xiu. Furthermore, they were not people of many words. Thus, outsiders did not know about this matter. Although Chu Xiu did not know why Zingaluo was able to come to him, Chu Xiu was certain that Zingaluo did not know that Moriha was dead. He did not even know that Moriha had fought with him. Otherwise, Zingaluo would not have asked Chu Xiu where Moriha was. Instead, he would have killed him. Zingaluo said coldly, "Still not admitting it? You have the Sanskrit sect's illusion art that belongs to Moriha. Where did it come from?" So this was the loophole. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly, but he still refused to admit it. "You're from the Sanskrit sect? What a joke. Why does illusion art belong to the Sanskrit sect alone? As the successor of Gu Zun, the cultivation methods of my lineage were collected and researched by generations of grandmasters. Is it strange that I know illusion art? Monk from the Sanskrit sect, this is not your Western region. This is the Eastern region. This is the Imperial Sky Pavilion. You have crossed the line." Zingaluo sneered. "Using your master and the Imperial Sky Pavilion to suppress me? A martial immortal Gu Zun is indeed difficult to deal with, but no matter how difficult he is only one person. Do you think the Sanskrit sect is afraid of a martial immortal? As for the Imperial Sky Pavilion, they are already half dead, and you still want to use them to suppress me? What a joke. Since you're not willing to admit it, then come back to the Sanskrit sect with me and spit out everything you know." As soon as Zingaluo's voice fell, he grabbed at Chu Xiu. Golden stellar energy condensed into a giant hand that blotted out the sky. The entire prefectural governor manor was alarmed at this moment. This light was no ordinary Buddhist light. At that moment, it was clearly night, but they seemed to see the sun. Chu Xiu did not expect Zingaluo to make a move just like that. He was not arrogant, but confident. Extremely confident. Just as he said, he really did not care about the Imperial Sky Pavilion and a Gu Zun. Now that Zingaluo was about to take over the position of Vishnu Temple Lord, he would not allow any mistakes in his task. Even if Chu Xiu really had nothing to do with Moriha, he would only know after interrogating him. The giant hand with the power of the sun grabbed at Chu Xiu. In the next moment, a misty domain spread out in front of Chu Xiu and enveloped the giant hand. Seeing Chu Xiu use his domain, Zingaluo could not help but sneer. It was obvious that Chu Xiu was a cultivator who had just stepped into the Heaven and Earth Illumination realm. Veteran Heaven and Earth Illumination realm cultivators had rich combat experience and rarely used their domains. It was not that their domains were not strong enough, but when facing cultivators of the same level, they both had domains. Both sides had a deep understanding of domains, so it was too easy to counter them. However, the next moment, Zingaluo's expression suddenly changed. Everything in Chu Xiu's domain was distorted. It was not the distortion of space, but the distortion of the laws of heaven and earth. Yin and yang were in disorder, and the 5 elements were inverted. Any power was distorted, divided, and then devoured. The only one that was normal was Chu Xiu, who was in the center of the domain. Exanjialua's strength was indeed terrifying. That scorching giant hand lasted for 3 breaths of time in the domain. It wasn't until it was 10 meters away from Chu Xiu that it was completely distorted and destroyed. What kind of domain is this? Although Zingaluo looked young, he was actually about the same age as Linghu Xianshan. He had roamed the Daluotian world for so many years, but he had never seen such a strange domain. A domain that can kill you. As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, he slashed out with the formation-breaking sword in his hand. A piercingly cold light streaked across the sky and illuminated the entire prefectural governor manor. A Sanskrit rune appeared in front of Zingaluo and easily blocked Chu Xiu's blade. He raised his eyebrows and said, "What a sharp blade." But unfortunately, before he could finish speaking, Shang Tianliang had already punched out from behind him. The power of withering and glory distorted the time of the 4 seasons, causing the power to dissipate with the passage of time. He had actually heard the commotion outside long ago, but he had been looking for an opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Unfortunately, Zingaluo's power was so strong that even Shang Tianliang's sneak attack did not succeed. Behind him, endless rays of scorching sunlight blossomed, rendering all attacks unable to escape. The scorching power directly blasted Shang Tianliang away. It can affect time? What a strange power! Before Zingaluo could finish sighing, a pillar of fire shot up from the depths of the prefectural governor manor and smashed down on Zingaluo. With a loud bang, the scorching sun flames around Zingaluo were instantly suppressed and extinguished. Those were genuine flames of heaven and earth, and Zingaluo's sun flames were not drawn from the sun. He was directly sent flying by the huge pillar of fire. A hint of astonishment appeared in his eyes, and he immediately turned around to leave without saying anything. However, before he left, he took a deep look at Chu Xiu with a profound gaze. Chapter 1194. With Wei Shiya's manipulation of the rootless sacred flame, Exanjialua was temporarily pushed back. However, Chu Xiu wasn't very excited, because this meant that trouble was coming. Shang Tianliang and Wei Shiya walked over and asked, "Who was that guy just now?" "He should be from the Brahmin sect," Chu Xiu said. "He's here because of Moriha's murder. This is going to be troublesome." Wei Shiya had been in the Daluotian for a long time, so he knew the distribution of the Daluotian factions. He frowned and said, "If the Brahmin sect is here, it's going to be troublesome. With the Brahmin sect's current strength, the Imperial Sky Pavilion is no match for them. If they send a large number of cultivators, we won't be able to hold them off." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "We don't have to worry about them sending a large number of cultivators. The Daluotian had a lot more rules than the lower realms. The major sects had coexisted peacefully for a long time, so they wouldn't easily go to someone else's territory, let alone send a large army. The western and eastern regions were so far apart. If the Brahmin sect wanted to attack, the exalted divine palace was in the middle. If they tried to come from there, it would be equivalent to offending all the Daluotian sections. Therefore, they could only come through the southern or northern regions, but they would also have to explain to the sects in those regions. Moreover, the Brahmin sect isn't taking it easy right now. Although they're strong, they've been fighting with the Daluotian Temple for 10,000 years. If the Brahmin sect dares to attack me in large numbers, the temple will definitely seize the opportunity to attack. That's why the Brahmin sect won't dare to send a large army. Wei Wuxia relaxed slightly when he heard Chu Xiu's words. Chu Xiu was very far-sighted when it came to such matters. In the lower realms, he was very good at using these kinds of entanglements to solve difficult situations. Since he said the Brahmin sect wouldn't attack in large numbers, then they probably wouldn't. However, Chu Xiu frowned and said, although the Brahmin sect won't attack in large numbers, one person from time to time is enough to deal with us. The Brahmin sect has too many experts. This person hasn't even reached the martial immortal realm, but the 3 hall masters of the Brahmin sect are martial immortals, let alone the hierarch of the Brahmin sect. I heard he's a 9th-layer martial immortal realm expert. Chu Xiu was having a hard time dealing with the Brahmin sect. Especially with the strength of the Sanskrit sect, Chu Xiu would not be able to stand it if they sent someone over from time to time. However, Chu Xiu didn't have any good ideas for the time being. The only way was to strengthen his defense and then deal with whatever came his way. After instructing the other disciples to be on guard, Chu Xiu looked for Master Yuanji and asked him to set up a few more formations around the prefectural governor manor just in case. After instructing the other disciples to be on guard, Chu Xiu looked for Grandmaster Yuanji and asked him to set up a few more formations around the county governor's mansion just in case. The power of the fire earlier was extremely evil. It seemed like someone was controlling it, but it was actually the fire of the heavens and earth. Even he couldn't withstand it. Jianghu County was only one of the counties of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Moreover, it was close to the border and wasn't very important. Why were there so many experts in it? Apart from the fact that there were no martial immortals, it was probably comparable to the Imperial Sky Pavilion's headquarters. Just like Chu Xiu, Xinjia also felt that this was a thorny problem. Just like Chu Xiu said, the Brahmin sect had various concerns. It was impossible for them to bring so many experts to attack Jianghu County. Moreover, even if they could, he couldn't ask for it. He was preparing to take over the position of Hall Master. Although the mission seemed insignificant, it was related to his reputation. If he couldn't even handle such a small matter, and he had to ask for help from the sect, what use would he be if the credit went to the sect? Therefore, returning to the sect to ask for help was his last resort. Moreover, he didn't have any concrete evidence to prove that Chu Xiu was related to Moriha. After all, he hadn't really experienced the illusory art. He didn't know if it was really Moriha's illusory art. However, it was basically impossible for him to capture Chu Xiu now. Looking at the southern barbarian forest in the distance, Zingaluo mumbled, "Southern barbarian? Perhaps I can borrow their power." As soon as he finished speaking, Zingaluo crossed the southern barbarian forest and headed straight for the southern region. He couldn't borrow the power of the Brahmin sect, but he could borrow the power of others. For example, the southern region was very close to southern barbarian. They were only separated by a dense forest. Compared to the eastern region's climate and terrain, the southern region was humid and rainy. Forests and ravines were everywhere, and there were very few plains. Therefore, some prefectures were even built on cliffs, and some sects were hidden in the forests. As Xinjia walked through the humid and stuffy forest, his entire body was surrounded by scorching astral energy. Wherever he passed, there was a layer of mist. However, the further he went, the stranger the things he could see. There was a giant blood-red tree with human heads, skeletons, and skulls that hadn't had time to rot. There was also a broken bridge with a scarlet stream flowing under it. Even the edge of the broken bridge could be seen. It wasn't a bridge at all, but the ribs of a huge creature. There were also all kinds of strange statues along the way. This made Zingaluo frown. What kind of aesthetic did the people from the blissful demon palace have? After walking for a few more kilometers, what appeared in front of Zingaluo was a normal palace complex. It was completely black and exuded a strong demonic aura. The aura soared into the sky. Within the range of the palace, all birds and beasts were extinct, and there was only silence. This was the blissful demon palace. To be precise, it was a branch palace of the blissful demon palace guarding the southern barbarian border. It was also the strongest branch palace. It was responsible for entering the southern barbarian forest to capture some fierce beasts and even barbarians for the blissful demon palace to study. Fan Sect's Zingaluo requests an audience. After a while, Zingaluo was politely welcomed into the blissful demon palace. A middle-aged man wearing black armor with a slightly sinister appearance walked over and laughed. I heard that Brother Zingaluo has become the Lord of the Vishnu Palace. Congratulations. Zingaluo shook his head. My surname is not Zingaluo, and I'm not the Lord yet. Only a martial immortal can be the Lord of the Vishnu Palace. The person in front of him was the Lord of this branch palace of the blissful demon palace, Nine-Nethered Devil, Ming Xuanyu. Although Ming Xuanyu wasn't in the martial immortal realm, he was similar to Zingaluo. He was at the peak of the mysterious heaven and earth realm, and he had a chance to enter the martial immortal realm. It's about the same. It's just a matter of time. As he spoke, Ming Xuanyu asked someone to bring over a crystal pot. There was a kind of viscous liquid in it, like blood. Brother Exen, please have a taste. This is something I've researched recently. I've gathered the blood from the hearts of several ferocious beasts, and I've also taken the blood of a powerful berserker tribe leader and mixed it with his blood. Drink it, and your blood will boil and your body will be refined. Zingaluo frowned slightly. Forget it, I don't want to eat meat. The blissful demon palace always liked to research these strange things. This had been criticized by many people in Jianghu. Ming Xuanyu took a sip and said in surprise, "Isn't this a habit of the heavenly Luo treasure temple? Since when did the Sanskrit sect have this habit?" Zingaluo coughed and said, "Isn't this a habit of the heavenly Luo treasure temple? Since when did the Sanskrit sect have this habit?" What is it?" Zingaluo said in a deep voice. "I want to borrow some people from the blissful demon palace to destroy the Jianghu county in the eastern region and bring the county governor to the Sanskrit sect. He has some secrets about the people of the Sanskrit sect. I must get them." Ming Xuanyu couldn't help but frown. It was true that he knew Zingaluo and they had some friendship. However, to be honest, they could only be considered friends if there was no conflict of interest between them. If there was a conflict of interest, however, this little bit of friendship could make them turn against each other. After pondering for a moment, Ming Xuanyu said, "This is a little difficult. The blissful demon palace is in the southern region, but the other party is in the eastern region. Crossing borders is a taboo. You know this. Moreover, the other party is from the Imperial Sky Pavilion. If I touch him, it will be hard to explain." Zingaluo said calmly, "Don't worry, I'm not asking you to cross borders. I'm not asking you to make a move in Jianghu County, but in the southern barbaric land. That's not considered Jianghu County's territory. Also, you don't have to worry about the Imperial Sky Pavilion. I've just returned from the eastern region. I believe you've heard about the situation there. Right now, the Imperial Sky Pavilion only has one martial immortal and is besieged by internal and external troubles. Even if I touch the county governor, what can they do?" Ming Xuanyu still didn't say anything. Indeed, they couldn't do anything. The blissful demon palace didn't fear the Imperial Sky Pavilion. However, the problem was, while they didn't fear the Imperial Sky Pavilion, with the little bit of friendship between them, even if Zingaluo came and treated him courteously, it would be far from enough for him to take out the real deal. Seeing Ming Xuanyu's expression, Zingaluo couldn't help but sneer inwardly. However, on the surface, he said calmly, "Brother Ming, there are benefits in this. I'm not asking you to make a move for nothing. I don't know what method Chu Xiu used, but he actually managed to control a tribe of the southern barbaric land. He can make the tribe fight for him. I believe this method, or perhaps this tribe, is something the blissful demon palace needs, right?" Once Zingaluo said that, Ming Xuanyu's expression immediately changed. In fact, the relationship between Chu Xiu and the Black Net tribe could no longer be concealed. Zingaluo had obtained a lot of information about Chu Xiu from Linghu Immortal Mountain. The Black Net tribe had attacked so many times in a row, and the weapons in their hands, their relationship with Jianghu County, and so on, had long been noticed by others. However, no one bothered to do anything about it. For the Imperial Sky Pavilion, Chu Xiu was one of their own. As long as he could guarantee the peace of the southern barbaric land, it was fine. As for the High Heaven sect, it didn't matter since they were located in the hinterland of the Eastern Territory and didn't border the southern barbaric land. However, the Blissful Demon Palace was very concerned about this news because they really needed these barbarians. The Blissful Demon Palace always liked to research all kinds of evil things. Some of them even needed to use human lives or the flesh and blood of experts to experiment. Attacking other cultivators would ruin their reputation, and they would easily become the target of public criticism. Therefore, they set their sights on these barbarians. Being able to control a barbarian tribe was quite useful to the Blissful Demon Palace. Chapter 1195. The main purpose of the Blissful Demon Palace's branch palace that Ming Xuanyu oversaw was to capture the ferocious beasts in the Dilua mountain range. Of course, there were also barbarians among them, who were used for various experiments by the Blissful Demon Palace. So, when Ming Xuanyu heard from Xen Jialua that Chu Xiu could control a barbarian tribe, he immediately thought of how useful it would be for the Blissful Demon Palace. The barbarians in the Dilua mountain range were not weak. He could deal with some small tribes, but if he were to provoke a large tribe, it would cause the large tribes in the depths of the Dilua mountain range to join forces against him. That would be very difficult to deal with. If he could be like Chu Xiu and control a large tribe in the southern barbarian land, it would be much more convenient for him to have them help him capture people. However, Ming Xuanyu still didn't agree to Xen Jialua's request. Xen Jialua was only providing him with information. If he wanted the Blissful Demon Palace to be his fighter, how could it be that easy? So, Ming Xuanyu put on a troubled expression and said, "Brother Xen, to be honest, I also want to do it. But right now, my branch palace is a bit understaffed. Among the several branches of the Blissful Demon Palace, my branch palace is a very difficult job. We need to collect ferocious beasts and capture the barbarians. So, don't be fooled by the number of people in my branch palace. In fact, there aren't many people here. If I send people to help you, what will happen to my task here?" Xen Jialua frowned and inwardly cursed Ming Xuanyu for being too greedy. After thinking for a while, Xen Jialua took out a bone from his spatial box. The bone was the size of an arm, but it looked like a finger bone. It was pitch black and emitted a ferocious aura. Ming Xuanyu's eyes immediately revealed a look of surprise. "This is the finger bone of a black demon ape?" Xen Jialua nodded. "It's the black demon ape's finger bone. When the Sanskrit church first arrived in the western regions, we dispatched a large number of experts to exterminate this beast. Even a martial immortal expert died. Originally, we wanted to subdue this beast, but we didn't expect it to be so ferocious. Left with no choice, we could only use our full strength to kill it. After so many years, most of the materials on this black demon ape have been used up. This phalanx is the only thing I have left. Brother Ming, bring him back to the Blissful Devil Palace's headquarters and report to them. Have the others surround and kill Chu Xiu. Is that enough?" Ming Xuanyu put away the finger bone of the black demonic ape and couldn't help but reveal a smile on his gloomy face. "Yes, of course it's enough. However, Brother Xen, I'll say it again. If you want me to fight alone, then it doesn't matter. But if you want to borrow the power of my Blissful Demon Palace, you can't cross the border." Overstepping one's boundaries is a huge taboo. My Blissful Devil Palace has never thought of becoming enemies with those big sects of the eastern region. Xen Jialua said in a deep voice, "That's easy. I've said it before. I'm not asking you to go to Jianghu County. Make your move in the Dilua mountain range in the southern barbaric lands. That place can't be considered as the Imperial Sky Pavilion's territory, right? Then how are you going to lure him to the southern barbaric land? It's very simple. Isn't the Black Civ tribe under their control? Just send people to exterminate the Black Civ tribe. Remember, there's no need to be too ruthless. It's fine as long as they feel the threat of extermination. At that time, they'll naturally be lured over." Ming Xuanyu waved his hand and said, "I'm familiar with that. I guarantee that I'll handle it properly. As he spoke, Ming Xuanyu raised the cup of sticky blood and offered it to Xen Jialo. Speaking of which, Brother Xen, are you sure you don't want a cup? It's very nourishing. Xen Jialua had a cold expression. I'm very strong. I don't need nourishment. In Kangwu County, during this period of time, Chu Xiu didn't go into closed-door training. Instead, he instructed the crowd to set up defenses and gather information regarding Xen Jialua. Although Xen Jialua didn't reveal his name, his strength of half-step martial immortal and his extremely eye-catching cultivation technique were enough to prove his identity. Sanskrit sect, Vishnu Palace, Sun God Palace's Palace Master Xen Jialua. He was an expert half-step martial immortal and the successor of the Vishnu Palace's Palace Master. In fact, once he stepped into the martial immortal realm, the previous Palace Master would immediately step down. Xen Jialua's status was clearly much higher than Moriha's. Thus, even if Chu Xiu knew that the Sanskrit sect wouldn't launch a large-scale attack, Chu Xiu still wouldn't be able to handle two experts of such caliber. As for Tianhun, Chu Xiu didn't tell him about this matter. Being imprisoned in the spiritual cloud realm, Tianhun couldn't do anything apart from his head. Even if Chu Xiu exhausted the power of his primordial spirit, he would only be able to ask Tianhun some questions regarding cultivation. As for asking Tianhun for advice, Chu Xiu never thought about that. He believed in his own abilities. Furthermore, he didn't think that Tianhun was stronger than him. Tianhun wasn't Dugu Weiwei. He had inherited Dugu Weiwei's memory from 500 years ago. Thus, even if he walked the same path as Dugu Weiwei 500 years ago, he might have the strength of Dugu Weiwei, but he wouldn't have the means of Dugu Weiwei. Chu Xiu had fought his way up from the mortal world. Obviously, he was better at this kind of thing. Just as Chu Xiu had arranged everything, Kecha sent news that He Luo tribe was in trouble. Hearing this news, Chu Xiu suddenly frowned. Previously, he had told He Jie and the others that accumulating strength should be done step by step. If he was too aggressive, it would easily cause the whole southern barbarian tribe to target him. Could it be that He Jie was too impatient for success, so he caused a siege? He Luo tribe was the key to Chu Xiu's plan in the southern barbarian land. Unless he had the strength to deal with all the southern barbarian tribes in the Dilua mountain range, he had to use He Luo tribe. Therefore, when he heard that He Luo tribe was in trouble, he immediately went to the southern barbarian land. After arriving at He Luo tribe, Chu Xiu discovered that He Jie and the others were in a worse state than he had imagined. He Jie's bones were all broken, and his face was pale. He had been seriously injured. Green Jade's face was also extremely pale. Although she wasn't injured, her aura was extremely weak. It was obvious that her spirit had been injured. What's going on? Which tribe injured you so badly? Chu Xiu asked with a frown. He Jie was so injured that he couldn't speak. Green Jade's aura was weak as she said, "It's the foreigners from the south." Green Jade obviously didn't recognize the people from the blissful demon palace. Since it wasn't the foreigners from the east, it must be from the south. Kecha said, "Sir, it's the people from the blissful demon palace." The blissful demon palace? Chu Xiu frowned. He had come across the ruins of the blissful demon palace in the lower world. He only had two impressions of this sect. One was that they were stubborn, and the other was that they were evil. In fact, this was indeed the case. The blissful demon palace didn't have a good reputation among the Daluotian people. The main reason was that they liked to research all sorts of strange and evil things. Therefore, they were hated by all the Daluotian people. The blissful demon palace is in the southern territory. Why would they come here and attack the He Luo tribe? Kecha explained, the blissful demon palace likes to research all sorts of evil techniques. Some of them even use living people as experiments. They're purely tired of living if they attack the large sections. Even if they attack some independent cultivators or small sects without any foundation, their reputation will be affected, or they will be warned. Therefore, they can only target the barbarians. Near the southern territory, the blissful demon palace even specially built a branch to capture the barbarians and ferocious beasts in the Dilua mountain range. Perhaps because they've been capturing them for too long, the barbarians near the southern territory have become a little vigilant. Therefore, they came to the mountain range near the eastern territory to capture them. Chu Xiu nodded. He suddenly asked, "Did the blissful demon palace try to kill you? Who was the one who did it?" Green Jade shook her head and said, "No, they didn't. They seemed to want to capture us alive." The patriarch was already injured to this extent, but they still didn't kill us. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to escape. The one who did it was just an ordinary heaven and earth mystic insight realm cultivator. He's far weaker than you, my lord. However, they have many things in their hands that can restrain our tribe. We've never come into contact with these things before. We were caught off guard and fell into their trap. Chu Xiu nodded. Although he still felt that something was wrong, everything made sense. It seemed like the other party had really come to capture them. As for Xen Jialua, it wasn't that Chu Xiu was careless, but he had overlooked something. The Daluotian and the lower realm were different. Chu Xiu had been in the lower realm for so many years. The idea that the righteous and demonic paths couldn't coexist with each other had been carved into his bones. Not long ago, he had even destroyed 2 Buddhist sections. However, the Daluotian were different. The Buddhists and demonic paths didn't have such a strong antagonism. They belonged to 4 different regions. The Buddhists were in the western region, while the demonic paths were in the southern region. The grudges between the 2 sides weren't that big. Even with Dugu Weiwei's appearance, Dugu Weiwei's target was the entire Daluotian, not the righteous path. Even though the Sanskrit sex style was different from the heavenly treasure Shahs, it was still considered a branch of the Buddhist path. Chu Xiu would never have thought that this matter was actually a trap set up by Xen Jialua. Hence, Chu Xiu said, "For the time being, the Black Net tribe will withdraw their defenses. Leave it to me." Beside him, Kocha said, "Are you going to make a move, my lord? As far as I know, the people from the Blissful Demon Palace are all crazy people. They're not easy to deal with." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. "Even if they're not easy to deal with, we'll fight them. The Dilua mountain range is huge. If they want to go somewhere else, I can't stop them. But if they insist on causing trouble here, then don't blame me for being impolite." After giving Green Jade his orders, Chu Xiu sent Kocha back to report the situation. He himself headed to the place that Green Jade had mentioned, the place where the Blissful Demon Palace were camped. In the gloomy mountain forest, powerful demonic energy drifted about. It was extremely conspicuous. Chu Xiu didn't need to look too hard to find it. However, before Chu Xiu could get close, he sensed that something was wrong. This mountain range was close to the eastern region, which was extremely far from the southern region. The Blissful Demon Palace had captured so many barbarians, so they should know that the barbarians were extremely hostile towards them. Yet they were still so high profile. Weren't they afraid of being discovered and attacked by a group of barbarians? After all, these barbarian tribes were still very united when facing outsiders. Sensing that something was wrong, Chu Xiu was just about to retreat when the blinding golden rays of the sun lit up. Exangela calmly walked out and said, "Chu Xiu, you can't escape from my grasp." Chapter 1196. The moment he saw Xen Jialua, Chu Xiu knew that he had fallen into a trap. There was no vexation or remorse. Chu Xiu rarely had such emotions. Counter soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir. If there was a problem, he would solve it. There was no medicine for regret in this world. Moreover, Xen Jiao wasn't the only one who had appeared in front of Chu Xiu. Ming Xuanyu and 2 other Pure Bliss Demon Palace Mystic Illumination Realm experts were also here. The outermost group was a group of Pure Bliss Demon Palace disciples, setting up a formation from afar. They were too weak. If they approached, they would be detected by Chu Xiu. Moreover, they were afraid of suffering too many casualties. Therefore, they could only set up a formation to intercept them from afar. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. "Xan Jialua, what are you trying to do? I've already said that I don't know any Moriha. Why do you insist on pestering me?" "You don't know Moriha? Then where did the illusion on your body come from? Don't tell me that it was passed down by your ancestors." There aren't that many coincidences in this world. Jialua sneered. Chu Xiu, if you really have a clear conscience, then follow me back to the Sanskrit sect. My Vishnu palace has a secret technique to probe one's mind. After proving that you're innocent, I will personally apologize to you. Otherwise, if you resist, it means that you have a guilty conscience. That means that there's something fishy going on. Chu Xiu snorted. What a joke. I'm the Imperial Sky Pavilion's Jianghu County Governor and primeval successor. You want to probe my mind just because you say so? That's a complete humiliation. Jialua, you want to attack me just because of a groundless matter? Aren't you afraid that the Imperial Sky Pavilion and my master will blame you? Jialua sneered. Afraid? If I was afraid, I wouldn't have attacked you before. Cut the crap. Chu Xiu, since you're unwilling to surrender, don't blame me for being impolite. With that, Jialua waved his hand, ordering Ming Xuanyu and the others to charge forward. If Jialua came alone, Chu Xiu wouldn't be able to defeat him, but he was confident that he could block him. However, now that Ming Xuanyu had joined the fray, as well as 2 heaven and earth profound insight cultivators, Chu Xiu was truly unable to hold them off. Therefore, in that instant, the pure demonic aura around Chu Xiu's body swirled and frantically devoured the surrounding qi of heaven and earth. With the use of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, Chu Xiu's body began to expand continuously. A strong aura suddenly descended like a demon god. Divine ability! Divine ability! Jialua and Ming Xuanyu almost simultaneously spat out these 2 words. The 2 of them were both martial artists from the peak schools of the Jianghu. They were also existences with hopes of reaching the martial immortal realm. Naturally, they would not be unfamiliar with divine abilities. However, that was something that they had yet to grasp. Only after reaching the martial immortal realm would they dare to attempt to grasp it. And now, Chu Xiu had openly used a divine ability right before their eyes. This was an enormous blow to them. Furthermore, as Chu Xiu unleashed the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, he also turned his gaze towards Ming Xuanyu and the other Bliss Demon Palace cultivators. His eyes flickered with dense killing intent. Seeing that, Ming Xuanyu immediately shouted, "Retreat! Retreat!" At that moment, he was cursing in his heart. I'm clearly here to help. The one who wants to capture you is Jiao. Why are you attacking me? Although Ming Xuanyu had fought with many people and seen divine abilities, he had never faced a divine ability before. He did not know what sort of might a divine ability from a heaven and earth profound insight cultivator would possess. However, it was clear that it would not be weak. He had only come to help. He did not want to lose his life. Even if he were to be injured, it would not be worth it. However, at that moment, Chu Xiu's figure rapidly shrunk. The natural energy that he had frantically absorbed dispersed in an instant, transforming into an extremely powerful explosive force. In an instant, Chu Xiu's figure was already several hundred zhang away. In that instant, Ming Xuanyu's expression darkened. I've been tricked. I've actually been tricked. Facing 2 peak heaven and earth profound insight cultivators, one of whom was a half-step martial immortal, Chu Xiu would have to be insane to fight them head-on. The might of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth or the clear sky illuminating shadow was indeed astonishing. However, even a slightly weaker lawful embodiment of heaven and earth would threaten Chu Xiu's source energy if used for too long. Thus, even if Chu Xiu were to risk his life and kill one of them, he would still suffer a loss. What else could he do but run? Jialua did not retreat in fear. As he chased after Chu Xiu, he shouted angrily at Ming Xuanyu, "Why are you running?" Ming Xuanyu snorted coldly, but did not say a word. That was a divine ability, and it was aimed at you. If you were in my shoes, would you not run? At that moment, the blissful demon palace cultivators in the distance had already activated their array, blocking in front of Chu Xiu. However, in the next instant, Chu Xiu's god domain opened up around him. Within the misty domain, yin and yang were in a mess, and the 5 elements were reversed. Everything was distorted. The radiance of the array was distorted and disappeared in the domain. Even though the blissful demon palace cultivators were experts at the true fire spirit refinement realm, once they were pulled into the domain, their bodies began to distort in a strange manner. Even though they frantically used their astral energy, it was of no use. After the astral energy left their bodies, it was immediately melted and torn apart. Their entire bodies were torn into a bloody mist in the domain. No one had ever seen such a strange domain before. Ming Xuanyu shouted from behind, "Retreat! Hurry and retreat!" These people were all elites under his command. Xen Jialua's finger bone was not enough to exchange for their lives. In fact, even without Ming Xuanyu's words, the blissful demon palace cultivators also began to retreat frantically. No one was willing to throw away their lives like that. Xen Jialua cursed them inwardly for being useless. However, this group of people had helped him delay Chu Xiu for about a breath's time. One breath of time was more than enough. Behind Xen Jialua, a large sun rose into the sky, and a strong fiery light condensed in his hand, turning into a longbow. In that instant, all the surrounding spiritual energy frantically surged into his longbow, as if it was fuel. With a rumble, raging flames soared into the sky. Powerful power poured into the longbow. As Xen Jialua's arrow shot out, it was as if the great sun had fallen. Wherever the arrow passed, the trees and forests were instantly burned to ashes. The air was distorted, and the earth and stones under their feet melted like magma erupting. Chu Xiu's expression changed abruptly. Was this the power of a half-step martial immortal? No wonder everyone said that Xen Jialua would definitely become a martial immortal. With his current power, it was only a matter of time before he became a martial immortal. Chu Xiu turned around and formed hand seals. His domain spread out. The misty domain enveloped the arrow, constantly distorting its power. However, the power of the arrow was too strong. Even if Chu Xiu's domain could distort everything, it could only distort and tear apart the outer layer of flames. The power within was still powerful. But at this moment, Chu Xiu's hand seals had already been completed. In an instant, a series of ghostly wails and howls resounded in the domain. The space in midair was torn apart, and a terrifying demonic shadow reached out and grabbed the arrow. It was as if it wanted to drag the arrow into an endless gloomy land of death. At that moment, Singular formed a seal with his hand. His body had already turned into the scorching light of the sun. His body seemed to have some kind of connection with the arrow. Almost in an instant, he appeared in front of the scorching arrow. Xen Jialua's hand seals descended and a blazing light blossomed around him. Layers of mystical Sanskrit enveloped him. In the next instant, the great sun descended. Blinding light rose and a scorching aura tore and burned everything. It was as if a volcano had erupted on the ground. A huge crater was formed from the scorching heat. Within the crater, there were even black flowing crystals formed from the melted earth. However, there was no sign of Chu Xiu. There was not even a corpse. Damn it. You really know Moriha's illusion technique. Xen Jialua reacted in an instant. The power of the Great Compassion Mantra should have been prepared by Chu Xiu long ago. The one who formed the hand seals slowly at the end was not Chu Xiu at all. It was so natural that he could not see any flaws. Other than Moriha's illusion technique, he could not think of a second Daluotian technique that could turn illusions into reality. At this time, Ming Xuanyu also came over with his men. He asked, "You didn't catch him?" Xen Jialua didn't answer him. Instead, he coldly snorted and questioned, "Brother Ming, I gave you the information and the items so that you could help, not to watch the show. Why did you run away just now?" Although Ming Xuanyu was a little embarrassed, he still retorted confidently, "That was a divine ability. If you were targeted by a divine ability, would you run? Besides, I asked you about this Chu Xiu before. You didn't say that he knew a divine ability." Xen Jialua was also speechless. He himself did not know, so how could he tell him? However, this was not the Western territory, nor was it the Sanskrit religion. The only force he could use was the blissful demon palace. Therefore, he could only suppress his anger and said, "The monk can run, but the temple can't." As long as this Chu Xiu is still in Jianghu County, he will come out. What are you going to do? Ming Xuanyu asked. Xan Jialua said coldly, the Black Net tribe is in his hands. He also built a stronghold in the southern barbaric land, which is guarded by the Black Net tribe. It seems that he has some plans in the entire southern barbaric land. Attack his stronghold. If we can't take it down, then surround it until he shows up, or until he abandons his base. Ming Xuanyu shrugged and did not express any opinion. In any case, he was here to be a hired thug, so of course, everything would be decided by Xan Jialua. However, he still said, Brother X, let me say this in advance. This place is very close to Jianghu County. If the Eastern Territory's big sects like High Heaven sect come, I will have to withdraw with my men. It's not worth offending the Eastern Territory's martial world for such a small matter. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Xan Jialua said this, but he felt a little disdainful towards Ming Xuanyu. The other party was a little too cautious. The martial Dao was like being a person. Without a brave and aggressive heart, how could one continue to move forward? In the past, his cultivation was similar to Ming Xuanyu's, but now, he was already half a step into the martial immortal realm, while the other party was only at the peak of the heaven and earth profound insight realm. This was the gap between them. Chapter 1197. As Chu Xiu escaped from the encirclement, his complexion was slightly pale. He didn't use too much of his strength, but his spirit power was greatly exhausted. Xan Jialua was a half-step martial immortal. If he didn't push his spirit power to its peak, he wouldn't be able to hide from Xan Jialua. Furthermore, at a time like this, even if he were to cast an illusion in front of Xan Jialua, it wouldn't matter if Xan Jialua saw it. Xan Jialua was extremely stubborn and overbearing. As long as he was certain that Chu Xiu was related to Moriha, he must get a result. Furthermore, the result must be determined by him. Thus, no matter how many false testimonies Chu Xiu gave, unless Xan Jialua personally verified Chu Xiu's memories, he wouldn't believe him. How troublesome! Chu Xiu let out a long sigh. After returning to the Black Luo tribe, he immediately moved the people of the Black Luo tribe to the stronghold he established in the southern barbaric land. At the same time, he notified Wuxia and Shang Tianliang to come and stand guard there. Since Xan Jialua knew of the relationship between him and the Black Luo tribe, it meant that Xan Jialua would definitely make an issue out of the Black Luo tribe. The Black Luo tribe was something that he had painstakingly nurtured. They were loyal and trusted fighters. He couldn't let them die just like that. When Shang Tianliang, Wuxia, and the others arrived and received the news, they also felt that it was very troublesome. Before the absolute power of the Blissful Demon Palace's Branch Palace and Xan Jialua, who was a half-step martial immortal, it was clear that playing petty tricks would be useless. Shang Tianliang thought for a moment and said, "You're a member of the Imperial Sky Pavilion now. Isn't the Pavilion Master a martial immortal? Let him deal with this." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "It's not that simple. Right now, the Imperial Sky Pavilion only has a single martial immortal. If he leaves the Imperial Sky Pavilion, there'll be no one to stand guard there. If the Cold River City were to attack us, who would stop them? Putting aside the fact that I'm only a guest of Cold River City, even if Lu Sanjin were to encounter such a crisis, the Imperial Sky Pavilion wouldn't care at all." While Chu Xiu was pondering, Mei Qinglian also walked over at this time. She handed over a pile of information with a solemn expression and said, "This is troublesome. People from the Blissful Devil Palace have been spotted all around the base. It seems like they're planning to surround us and kill us here." Chu Xiu knocked his head, feeling a little headache. In the face of such absolute power, he couldn't think of any good methods. Fortunately, this base's array formation was even more powerful than the county governor manors. After all, this place was the passageway between the two worlds, and there were many disciples of the Kunlun devil cult cultivating in it. Naturally, Chu Xiu had to be extremely cautious and directly operated this stronghold as the headquarters of the Kunlun devil cult. However, it wasn't enough to just be surrounded by people. Moreover, It was impossible for him to activate the array formation for a long period of time. Once the array formation was activated, it would consume a lot of resources. At this time, Chu Xiu subconsciously flipped through the information that Mei Qinglian handed him. Apart from information about the blissful Devil Palace, there was also information about the lower realm. In fact, there would be information about the lower realm sent to him every once in a while. This information should have been sent to him before he went to the Black Luo tribe. In the end, because Chu Xiu suddenly went to the Black Luo tribe, he was delayed and didn't see this information. Chu Xiu glanced at it. There was a piece of information that was extremely eye-catching. A conflict broke out between the West Chu World Alliance and the Windcloud Sword Tomb. Qinqing Di severely injured the Windcloud Sword Tomb's mystic enlightening realm powerhouse, Sword Venerable Zhongli Mu, with one punch. Chu Xiu pointed at the information and said, "When did this happen? What exactly happened?" Mei Qinglian glanced at the information above and said, "Oh, it's this. It happened a few days ago. The World Alliance is actually quite law-abiding. It has always been that we don't offend others if they don't offend us. However, a few days ago, Chen Qingdi's disciple, Xie Xiaolu, had some conflict with a younger generation disciple of the Windcloud Sword Tomb who entered the Longhu list." "Are you sure it's Xie Xiaolu?" Although Chu Xiu hadn't seen Xie Xiaolu for a long time, he still knew Xie Xiaolu very well. This person was a very proud person. The current Xie Xiaolu should be at the real pellet state. He no longer belonged to the youngest generation of martial artists. The Longhu list had been updated for 2 generations. What conflict could he have with the younger generation martial artists? He should be disdainful of bullying the younger generation. It seems that the younger generation martial artist of the Windcloud Sword Tomb spoke ill of the World Alliance, and he was punished by Xie Xiaolu. Later, his master came, and he was also defeated by Xie Xiaolu. But in the end, he provoked an elder of the Windcloud Sword Tomb, who seriously injured Xie Xiaolu. Then, he angered Qinqing Di, who personally went to the Windcloud Sword Tomb to demand an explanation. Chu Xiu nodded. This was in line with Qinqing Di's character. Normally, Emperor Qinqing seemed to be very strict with Xie Xiaolu, looking down on this person, looking down on that person. Basically, he mainly dealt a blow to Xie Xiaolu, giving him a setback education. But in fact, Qinqing Di was still very protective of his disciples. "Only I can beat my disciple. If others dare to move, they will die." How many punches did Qinqing Di use to defeat Zhongli Mu? Mei Qinglian's expression was a little strange. 2 punches, to be precise. It was 1 punch. The first punch shattered the Windcloud Sword Tomb's sect protection formation, and it directly alarmed Zhongli Mu. Qinqing Di directly said, "You beat the younger one, and the older one came. I'll be more direct, and beat the oldest one. I don't believe that the dead of the Windcloud Sword Tomb will climb out of their graves to find trouble with me." After saying that, Qinqing Di only used 1 punch, and Zhongli Mu vomited blood. After hearing Mei Qinglian's words, Chu Xiu was shocked, and everyone else present also had the same reaction. Sword Venerable Zhongli Mu, the personal disciple of the Sword Sovereign Shin Kangwu 500 years ago, was in existence at the peak of the heaven and earth profound understanding realm. When he became famous in the pugilistic world, Wei Shia could only be considered a junior who had just entered the pugilistic world. This person had not appeared for 100 years, and the last time he appeared was when Chu Xiu rebuilt the Kunlun Devil cult. He joined hands with the righteous martial world to threaten Chu Xiu. At that time, although Zhongli Mu did not make a move, but Chu Xiu and the others could be sure that the other party definitely had a certain level of combat power, and was definitely not old to the point that he could not move. But now, he was seriously injured by Qinqing Di with 1 punch. What level of cultivation did Qinqing Di reach? Chu Xiu touched his chin. It seemed that Qinqing Di should have broken through again. In the whole pugilistic world, there were actually only 2 people who practiced the true fire body refining. One was Chu Xiu, and the other was Qinqing Di. Chu Xiu was only a subsidiary, and for him, the true fire body refining was only a method to increase combat power and physical strength. Qinqing Di was even more extreme. He directly gave up the normal path of cultivation and took the path of body refining. In short, Chen Qingdi was no longer considered to be in the true fire spirit refining realm. Even if he broke through, he would not be in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, nor would he have a domain, but he had a combat power that could match it. If they were to talk about resemblances, then Emperor Chen Qingdi was rather similar to the berserkers from the celestial absolute heaven. However, he was 100 or even 1,000 times more powerful than them. That was because the path he had taken was a path without a path. He had to overcome all obstacles on his own. Chu Xiu suddenly said at this time, "Now that we are trapped here, as long as we move, Xen Jialua and the others will definitely make a move. If we don't repel them, my previous arrangements in the southern barbaric land will be in vain. I want to go to the lower realm to find support. What do you think?" Everyone present immediately reacted to who Chu Xiu was looking for. "Chen Qingdi?" Chu Xiu nodded. Wei Shia said in a deep voice, "It's not impossible to find Chen Qingdi, but first you have to determine whether Chen Qingdi can be trusted. Also, are you sure that Chen Qingdi can deal with that Xian Jialua?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "For so many years, you should have heard about Chen Qingdi. Chen Qingdi may be simple and crude, and his actions are also overbearing, but he has never done anything that goes against faith. At least in terms of morality, what Chen Qingdi does is better than most of the so-called righteous people. Of course, this is just my opinion. Whether Chen Qingdi can be trusted, to be honest, I don't have absolute confidence, but Xie Xiaolu can be trusted. For his disciple, I think he will not fall out with me. I have 80% confidence in this matter. In fact, with Chu Xiu's character, he wants to have 99% confidence in anything. The last point is up to the will of the heavens. But now it has to be said that Xen Jialua did not attack Jianghu County, but besieged Chu Xiu's stronghold in the south. He accidentally hit Chu Xiu's Achilles heel. If Xen Jialua went to Jianghu County, Chu Xiu might use the southern region's invasion of the eastern region as an excuse to do something, or he might not even care about the governor's office. But Chu Xiu couldn't give up the stronghold in the south no matter what. So let alone 80% confidence, even if it was only 50%, Chu Xiu would still do it. Knocking on the table, Chu Xiu continued, "There is also Chen Qingdi's strength. I feel that he is stronger than you think. This cultivation method of true fire body refinement is a path that no one has ever taken before, so don't bring it into the normal cultivation method. In the case of Chen Qingdi's normal true fire spirit refinement, 90% of true fire spirit refinement martial artists can't even take one punch from him. Even Elysium divine generals can't take more than a few punches from him. Now that he has broken through, it is not the heaven and earth mysterious realm. However, a heaven and earth mysterious realm powerhouse who was once famous in the pugilistic world couldn't even take one punch from him. You can imagine this power. I have already fought with Xen Jialua, and I can feel his strength. When I go to invite Chen Qingdi, I will also test his strength. If he really has the strength to fight with Xen Jialua, then I will say these things." Wei Shia and the others nodded. As long as Chu Xiu was confident, it was fine. The Kunlun devil cult, or rather, Chu Xiu's plan, had always been like this. Sometimes, when Chu Xiu proposed a very bold plan, although they didn't agree with it, they would fully cooperate with it and execute it. They thought that what they agreed with and trusted was Chu Xiu himself, and not the crazy plan. They believed that no matter how bold the plan was in Chu Xiu's hands, there was a possibility of success. Chapter 1198. Chu Xiu had already decided to go down to the lower realm and ask Chen Qingdi for help. However, he had other plans for the Daluotian side. Chen Qingdi could deal with Xen Jialua, but the people from the blissful demon palace had to be defeated as well. In fact, Chu Xiu wasn't weak in the Daluotian side. The elites of the Kunlun devil cult were almost all in the Daluotian side. If they were all released, they wouldn't be afraid of a branch of the blissful demon palace. However, these were his people, his trusted subordinates that he had painstakingly nurtured. It would be a waste if they were sacrificed at this time. Therefore, Chu Xiu could only think of other ways. Since this was the southern barbarian land, the matter would fall on the heads of the southern barbarian tribes. Chu Xiu found Green Jade and said to her, "The people from the blissful demon palace once captured the warriors of the tribes near the southern region and conducted all kinds of evil experiments. However, because you barbarians rarely communicate with each other, the barbarian tribes near the eastern region don't know about this. Now, I want you to send someone to inform the barbarian tribes and ask them to join forces to resist the blissful demon palace. However, this matter is very dangerous. We are surrounded by warriors from the blissful demon palace. Although they are mainly monitoring us warriors, barbarians don't have vital energy and won't be easily discovered. There is still a certain degree of risk. Who do you think is qualified to handle this matter?" If this happened in the Daluotian sects, they would definitely first carefully verify the matter to see if it was true. Then, they would think about all kinds of things, shirk responsibility, and even oppose in secret. They would have to wait until the Daluotian side clearly explained the pros and cons, and even offered sufficient benefits before they would be willing to join forces and attack. However, this matter was much simpler when it came to the barbarians. There weren't so many tricks. As long as the people from the Black Luo tribe went to the tribes and told them about this matter, and swore on their ancestors and gods, the other side would definitely believe them. The barbarian tribes were almost all straightforward people and wouldn't lie. In addition, they swore on their ancestors and gods, who were more important than their own lives. This made it even more impossible for it to be fake. Green Jade nodded and said, "Don't worry, Sir Divine Envoy. The warriors of the Black Civ tribe aren't afraid of death. I'm just afraid that we won't be able to complete the mission that Sir Divine Envoy has given us. I'll go make arrangements right away. The more people we have, the higher the chances of us breaking out of the encirclement." Chu Xiu nodded. Green Jade would handle such a small matter. After saying that, Chu Xiu immediately went to the lower realm. At this time, outside Chu Xiu's stronghold, the people from the blissful demon palace had already surrounded him. Ming Xuanyu looked at the stronghold in front of him, which was protected by layers of formations, and asked, "Are you going to storm it? Let me make this clear. If we storm it, the power of this formation isn't weak. You go first, and I'll make my move after breaking the formation. I can't let the disciples of the blissful demon palace throw away their lives." Exanjalwa snorted coldly and said, "Don't worry, we won't storm it for the time being. We'll just wear them out. I don't believe that they can maintain such a powerful formation all the time. Even the headquarters of the Imperial Sky Pavilion wouldn't be so extravagant." Although that was what Exanjalwa said, he was puzzled. He had always felt that this Chu Xiu was a little strange. Not only was he strange, but the things he did were also very strange. For example, this formation in front of him. He really couldn't understand what Chu Xiu was thinking. He didn't even make such a big formation for the county governor's mansion in Jianghu County. Instead, he built such a big stronghold in this desolate and uninhabited land of the southern barbarians and set up so many powerful formations. What was he trying to do? Could it be that the Imperial Sky Pavilion was preparing to attack the southern barbarians? Of course, Exanjalwa just casually thought about these things and didn't delve into it. For the current him, he only wanted to capture Chu Xiu and interrogate him about the whereabouts of Moriha. Whether he was dead or alive, a dignified palace master of the Sanskrit sect had to give him an explanation, especially when the other party was the palace master of his own Vishnu palace. Lower Realm, West Chu, Heaven Alliance. The Heaven Alliance wasn't in the prefecture of West Chu, but in a huge valley plain. Standing in front of the Heaven Alliance, Chu Xiu suddenly felt that the ancestors of Qinqingdi and High Firmament City would definitely have a common language. Their architectural styles were exactly the same. They were all big and incomparably magnificent, especially the palace where Qinqingdi was. It was obviously only one floor, but the foundation was more than 10 feet high. It was as if he liked to stand on a high place and look down. The current Chu Xiu could be said to have truly achieved the status where everyone in the world didn't know him. Even if he didn't have a relationship with Xie Xiaolu, he was still invited into the Heaven Alliance politely. After Xie Xiaolu heard the news, he immediately came out to greet Chu Xiu. When he was young, his temperament was relatively cold and he didn't talk much. These years, perhaps because he started to gradually take over the affairs of the Heaven Alliance, and because he hadn't seen his old friend Chu Xiu for a long time, he was very cordial. Brother Chu, actually, when I heard that you came back, I wanted to go to Kunlun Mountain to visit you. But unfortunately, the position of my Heaven Alliance is special. If I go, it won't be good. The Heaven Alliance was not a righteous path or a demonic path. When Chu Xiu came back, a group of people came to persuade Chu Xiu to repent. But in the end, he came to talk about the old days. It was indeed very awkward. You and I don't need to explain these things. In this world of big battles, actually, it's not easy for the Heaven Alliance to be able to remain neutral. Xie Xiaolu sighed and said, yes, it's not easy. Previously, Xie Xiaolu didn't participate in the messy affairs of the Heaven Alliance, so he didn't have such deep feelings. Only when Xie Xiaolu started to truly participate in the management of the Heaven Alliance did he know how difficult it was. The martial world is divided into righteous and demonic paths. Since the Heaven Alliance doesn't occupy either side, it's possible that both sides will come to find trouble with you. Therefore, the reason why the Heaven Alliance was able to last until now was because of Qin Qingdi's powerful strength. Oh right, Brother Xie, is Alliance Leader Qin in the Heaven Alliance? Xie Xiaolu nodded and said, Master is inside, I'll bring you to see him. In fact, Chu Xiu hasn't seen Qin Qingdi for a long time. Ever since the war between righteous and demonic paths started, the righteous and demonic paths started to fight each other. Qin Qingdi led the Heaven Alliance to maintain a neutral position. Because of his strength, no one was bored enough to provoke him. Therefore, Qin Qingdi spent most of his time cultivating and hasn't appeared in the martial world for a long time. In fact, many of the Heaven Alliance's matters were managed by Xie Xiaolu. Of course, sometimes Qin Qingdi would bring Xie Xiaolu to watch the show, just like when Chu Xiu destroyed the Subodhi Monastery. However, Qin Qingdi only watched and didn't participate. He was very low-key. Now that he saw Qin Qingdi, Chu Xiu could feel that Qin Qingdi had indeed broken through. His physical strength had even reached a level that Chu Xiu couldn't comprehend. Qin Qingdi's body now contained an explosive power. The power in every muscle he exposed shocked Chu Xiu. At this moment, Chu Xiu felt like he was looking at a walking fierce beast in human form. Qin Qingdi sat on a chair and laughed, saying, Great sect leader Chu, why do you have time to come to my Heaven Alliance? You don't come here for no reason. You definitely didn't come here to reminisce. Tell me, what's the matter? Chu Xiu smiled and said, Alliance leader Qin, you're making fun of me. Brother Xie and I are brothers. In front of Alliance leader Qin, I don't dare to call myself sect leader. However, I heard that Alliance leader Qin has stepped into a new realm. It just so happens that I've cultivated the true fire body refinement technique before. Therefore, I would like to ask Alliance leader Qin for some guidance. A faint smile appeared on Qin Qingdi's face. Oh, you want to spar with me? Sure. Previously, when I saw you fight with Rama, you used all kinds of techniques. It made me very envious. Today, I can see it for myself. If an ordinary junior had asked Qin Qingdi for guidance, Qin Qingdi would have directly punched him. Guidance, your grandma. You don't deserve it. However, Chu Xiu was different. After destroying the North and South Buddhist sects, Chu Xiu was now a supreme figure in the pugilistic world. At the very least, his fame was greater than Qin Qingdi's. As the two of them spoke, they walked towards the martial arts arena behind the Heaven Alliance. Xie Xiaolu was dumbfounded as he followed behind the two of them. Until now, he still couldn't figure out what was going on between the two of them. They only exchanged a few words. Why did they start fighting? On the martial arts arena, Qin Qingdi said indifferently, Get ready. My punch isn't that easy to receive. Chu Xiu nodded. Qin Qingdi didn't stand on ceremony. In the next moment, his fist had already smashed down. When the fist was unleashed, the wind and clouds dispersed. In front of that fist, all the power vanished into thin air. It wasn't because this fist had some special ability, but because under such pure power, even the heaven and earth Yuan Qi couldn't withstand such a powerful pressure. The array on the martial arts arena had just lit up when it was extinguished. Wherever the fist passed, the earth and rocks were sent flying, as if an earth dragon was flipping over. Xie Xiaolu, who was watching from afar, twitched his mouth. Master, did he forget that this was his own home? When Qin Qingdi punched out, Chu Xiu already knew Qin Qingdi's true strength. This was a punch of physical strength to the extreme. Even Lu Fengxian's physical strength after erupting with unparalleled strength couldn't compare to the power of Qin Qingdi's punch. Breaking through the array, a biting cold saber light tore through the void. At the same time, the God domain spread out. The 5 elements and yin and yang distorted, tearing apart all the power. However, it couldn't distort the body that was as strong as a fierce beast. A thunderous sound rang out. Qin Qingdi's punch not only tore apart Chu Xiu's domain, but also completely shattered his saber light. In the next moment, heaven's cry blood rain fell from the sky. The demon god's giant hand reached out and grabbed Qin Qingdi's fist. In an instant, the two forces were in a deadlock. However, after 3 breaths of time, the demon god's giant hand began to crack. Fortunately, when the great compassion mantra dissipated, the power of Qin Qingdi's punch was finally exhausted. Just as he was about to punch again, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "Stop. I'm not fighting anymore." You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.